Welcome to the Unveiling Shadows podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Mosby. Join me as I dive into powerful stories of resilience and strength. In each episode, I sit down with guests who have faced similar journeys of coercive control, financial manipulation, and personal invasion. Together, we uncover the shadows, share our experiences, and inspire others to reclaim their lives. Tune in, listen, and be a part of the community that stands tall against the forces that seek to control us.
He confirmed, and he said yes. He said when I was in, he said the military were playing it. He also used to work with MI5. He spent the last 11 years of his career debriefing MI5 spies and MI6 spies. And they were using this equipment. A lot of what we're targeted with, especially the V2K side of things, and it was developed as a telepathic communications thing, so that when spies went out into the field, if they were captured, they had no equipment on them. And while they were being questioned, the team back at home could see what was being looked at. They could hear everything. And through the V2K, they could advise them how to answer or what to say, or just talk them through things. Or when they were in situations, they could be communicated with to tell them what to look for, to tell them what to do, blah, blah, or how to get out of the situation. That's why it was first built.
Yeah.
Then they branched out into, well, we can actually control everybody with this shit. And then the guys at the ones who train everybody else, they got involved with the police. I mean, I can take my targeting and the surveillance side of it all the way back to 1982 when I was 16 and a half. And I met my ex-husband. I was at college.
Yeah.
And I moved in with him 6 months later. His family were very well connected to Gaddafi. His father was my boyfriend then, his father was a multimillionaire. I had no idea he was Libyan. He was half Libyan, blonde hair, blue eyes. And I was living with him for 6 months before I found out, and then thought, oh, my dad's going to go mad. What am I going to do? But he actually told me that his family were monitored by the intelligence services because of their connection to Gaddafi. And it turned out, and I only found this out in 2019 from the engineer who was friends with all the police officers in Hastings. And he actually said to me, when he explained to me what was going on, he said, did you realize that when you were living in the house with Baba, you were being spied on? And I said, well, I know they monitored the phone because he told me what the clicks were every time you picked up the phone. It was click, click, click. And he said, yeah, it wasn't just the phone. He described, I was horrified. He described something particular I do in bed. And he described it. And then he described conversations that I'd had and arguments that I'd had in the house with my then boyfriend. And I said, how did you know? How do you know about those conversations? And how do you know about that thing that I do? And that's when he told me that the house next door, which was owned by an old lady, they had rented the bottom part of her house. And there were shitloads of equipment. And they also had equipment in the house opposite, pointed in to the window, straight onto our bed. Everything was being sound recorded. Everything was being sight recorded. And the phone was monitored.
Wow.
I've been on these people's videos since I was 16 years old. When in 2007, I was stopped in the street by a Navy guy in Helston. I was going out to meet a friend. I've always been very smart, and when I went out, a lot of the time I used to wear trouser suits. I'm walking up the road going to see my friend, and we're going out for a couple of drinks. And this guy stopped me, and he said, I know you. And I said, oh, Christ, it's a bloody Navy guy. I said, no, you don't. I want to get past you. And he kept moving, so I couldn't get past him. And he said, I do know you. He says, and I know where your tattoos are. Now, I've got a few tattoos, but you can't see them unless I've got my clothes off.
Yeah.
You can see a top one here. I've got one on my finger, but you can see one here, but you can't see them unless I'm undressed. And I just looked at him and I said, no, you don't. He said, oh, yes, I do. He found it really amusing. And then he started logging my tattoos and where they are.
Wow.
That was when I stopped. I stopped trying to get past him and I stopped and paid attention to what he was saying. And I said, how do you know this? And he laughed and he said, you've got no idea, have you? And I said, no idea about what? He said, we've all been watching you for years.
Wow.
He said, you have one of the most famous asses up on the base. He said, you're on the wall of every officer's bedroom.
Wow.
I said, what? And he said, the cottage that I was living in when we first moved to Cornwall, we moved into a house in 2003 until 2005. Then in the centre of town, on a tiny little lane that's hidden away, you wouldn't know it was there if you didn't know the lane was there. There was this little cottage. And I walked past it. I was walking my dog and I walked past. I thought, oh, what's up there? It's up a tiny little alcove off this lane. And I walked up and I saw this cottage and I saw it was empty. And I thought, oh my God, I'd love to live there. I have to find out who owns it and if they're willing to rent it. As it turned out, 3 weeks later, I found an advert. It had come up for rent. Obviously, it wasn't by accident. I realise now, but at then, I took my lucks in.
Yeah.
I got in touch. I answered the advert, and I got in touch, and I was rented the house. And it was the only property in this little side street. It was a tiny little alleyway in the centre of the town, but so hidden you wouldn't know it was there.
Yeah.
With a tiny little alcove, and it was an upside down house. The bottom, you went in, and my daughter's bedroom was here. With a utility room going off to a bottom garden. A bit of an alcove where I kept the computer. Upstairs was the kitchen, the bathroom, and the living room, and a balcony that was so private nobody could see me. I love sunbathing. My bedroom was up in the loft. Now, I'd spent 2 years naked sunbathing from 2005 to 2007. If it was sunny, I was out there in every position you could possibly think of because I don't like white patches. So, nobody could see me. So I thought, unless you're 30,000 feet up. Whenever a helicopter went over, I would pull my towel over and cover myself. So I thought I was not being seen by anybody.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's plans explaining where my tattoos are, laughing about it, telling me that everybody had been watching me for 2 years and that I had one of the most famous asses up on the base. Now, in Helston, we have RNAS Naval Base Culdrose, RNAS Culdrose. It's a naval air base. They have RAF and Army there. There's a hospital there as well. It's huge. And they also have another satellite base called Predanek a couple of miles down the road where I think this targeting thing is being run from with the military. But I'll go into that on another day.
Okay.
Anyway, he started reeling off my tattoos and the fact, he said, you're sunbathing on that balcony. He said, you're out there every day when it's sunny. He said, you don't realise we're all watching you.
Wow.
He said, we know every inch of your body. I was horrified.
Yeah.
Then he said, we watch your daughter as well. We watch you in the bathroom. He described my bathroom. He described my bedroom, my daughter's bedroom. He described my bathroom, my daughter's tattoos that you can only see if she's naked. Now, she was 15 at the time.
Yeah.
And he said, we've been watching you two for years. You're famous. Everybody's made so much money out of you.
Wow.
And he was drunk and he thought it was hilarious. And I by then, I was so upset. I just pushed past him and I met my friend in the pub and I said, look, I'm really sorry. I've just heard some really upsetting news. I can't stop. I have to go. I'm really sorry. And she said, no, I said, no, I can't. I've got to go. And we moved. I spent a few months trying to find somewhere to live when we moved to another house. Now, later on down the line, I actually discovered there were cameras in my house and I know who put them there.
Yeah.
It was a man that was a husband. He was in the Navy and he was the husband of one of my friends. I was friends with her for 10 years, all in all. Every house that I lived in Helston, and there were 1, 2, 3, 5 properties. He put cameras in all of them. Coming to my house, can I use your loo? 2 of the properties I lived in, the last 2 properties I lived in, he turned up just after I moved in, posing as a gas man. And he said, your landlord's asked me to come and do the boiler check. And I said, it was the last 3 properties. Sorry, not 2, it was 3. First one he turned up at, and I opened the door and I said, Gary, what are you doing here? He said, oh, your landlord's asked me to come and do the boiler check. I said, you're in the Navy, you're not a gas man. And he pulled a card out of his pocket and he said, I'm moonlighting because we need extra money. Keep quiet about it. Don't tell anybody. I was friends with his wife. I didn't think. He came in, get the kettle on. Can I use your loo? He ran straight up to my bathroom without asking me where it was. He was in there for ages. I didn't suspect a thing, so I didn't question it. He came down, drank his coffee, took the front off the boiler, looked at a couple of bits, said, yeah, that's all fine. No paperwork. Off he went. I trusted him. I didn't think anything of it.
Yeah.
A couple of years later, my daughter decided she wanted to do her last year of college in London. So we moved up to London. God, it was awful. We moved up to London. After a year, we came back down to Cornwall. 2 weeks after I moved into my property, he turned up at the door. Your landlord's asked me to come and do the boiler check. And I laughed and I went, oh, crap, have you got a thing with every landlord? And he went, yeah, more or less. It's only a small place, Helston. And he also owned rental properties, so I thought he was obviously in with the landlord. I didn't question it. Again, get the kettle on. Can I use your loo? He was in the bathroom for ages. He came out, took the front off the boiler, had a look, cover, no paperwork, off he went. Now, in that property, that was 2010, and that's when I started to notice a couple of weeks later severe back pain and hip pain, but only when I was getting into bed. I'd get into bed. As soon as I tried to go to sleep, it was like somebody was putting a hot rod through my hips and up my spine. It was so painful. It was unreal. I went to the doctor, and at the same time, my feet started to go purple. And from my toes to 3 inches above my ankle, it was completely dark purple. 5 years, till 2016. Nobody could explain it. My doctor put me on morphine painkillers, tramadol, and something called amitriptyline, which is used to kill nerve pain. Basically what he did, he knew I was being targeted. He medicated me so it would cover the symptoms of being targeted.
Yeah.
And then when I moved into a cottage across the road, which I was in for 5 years, this guy turned up. 2 weeks after I moved in, knocked on the door. I opened it. I said, what are you doing here? He said, your landlord's asked me to come and do the boiler check. He pushed in past me. Can I use your loo? Get the kettle on. He went straight up to the bathroom without asking me where it was. So he already knew the layout of my house.
Yeah.
And I stood at the bottom of the stairs. And he came downstairs and I said, I want you to tell me why you're really here. And he said, your landlord's asked me to come and do the boiler check. I said, Gary, I haven't got a boiler. There's no gas here. My heating's electric. What are you doing here? The only thing that I had in that house that was gas was the cooker. My landlord actually made me get a gas man fit it because he was so worried that I might blow the house up fitting it myself. So I had to give him the documentation to prove I'd had it fitted properly, which I did. And I said, Gary, I haven't got a boiler. There's no gas here. My heating's electric. Why are you here? And his eyes shot around the room and he went, oh, no, sorry, my mistake. He's asked me to come and check the cooker. He went over to the cooker, turned all the rings on, turned them off. He said, yeah, that's fine. And off he toddled. That was when I realised something was wrong. And I started to think to myself, hang on a minute. And I went back to the conversation from 2008. And I started to fit things together and I'm thinking, right, hang on a minute. If there's something going up on that base. Now, at the same time, when I moved to Cornwall in 2003, I got a handyman to come and help me with some shelving in my house in 2004. Really nice guy called Dave. By 2006, he suddenly deteriorated into what I thought was schizophrenia. And I was very close friends with him. He's a bit of a hippie. I was really close friends with him before that. And he just went really weird. I went round to see him. It was completely unexpected. I went round to see him, went into his place. He lives in a converted barn in the middle of nowhere. And he had the room where his computer was, which was basically his living room, the windows were covered in foil. And I could see there was a foil hat shaped thing on his desk that he tried to hide out of the way. And he looked like shit. And I said, Dave, you look like you haven't slept for weeks. He said, I haven't. And he was talking really weird. And I said, look, tell me what's going on. We were close friends. He was a really nice guy. I said, right, tell me what's going on. And the way he was talking, it sounded like he was developing mental illness. And he said, I'm being targeted by a group of teenagers from a warehouse up in the Midlands. And the way he was talking about it, I'd never experienced anything like this. And I just thought, he's losing his marbles. And I said, Dave, I really do think you should go and talk to somebody, because what you're saying, it can't be. And this is what they rely on. What you're saying can't be true.
Right.
And one of his other friends then rang me a few weeks later and he said, look, I'm really worried about Dave. I think he's losing his mind. Something's happened. I don't know what's going on with him, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, it turned out Dave was targeted by the same people that have been doing me. But when this thing happened with Gary and turning up at the house where I didn't even have a boiler, I started to think, is there any connection with Dave? Because Dave lived just down the road from the military base. I thought, I wonder if there's any connection with what's going on with Dave and this man turning up at all my houses to do gas boiler checks. I'm never given any paperwork. My landlords have never said anything to me about sending anybody for a gas check.
Yeah.
And the last one he turned up, there is no gas. What's going on? And then I started to notice, when I moved to Cornwall, people kept talking about something called the Cornish Mafia. And I realise now that's what these guys label themselves at, little mafia.
Wow.
They're little mafia units. And the Cornish Mafia, basically, with these guys, all Freemasonry.
Yeah.
And it's the guy police and it's the guys in the military bases. And they call themselves the Cornish Mafia. And it's basically Freemasonry. And it's a sect. See, it's not all Freemasons. There are different groups. Like you have, different levels of different organizations where you have an entry level and then you progress and you go up to the next level and the next level.
Yeah.
But within Masonry, it's like when you get to the top levels of the satanic cult where they start Satan worshipping and all the swinging sex parties, the deviant behaviors, it's all part of the membership.
Yeah.
And if you want to get to that level, you have to be involved with that. And once you start to open your mind to that kind of deviant behavior, it creates new neural pathways in your mind which normalize that behavior, which is why these people don't think they're doing anything wrong, because in their mind, it's been normalized as normal behavior.
Yeah.
Which is how it's so widespread. And I started to dig. I realized at that point in time that there was obviously something going on the base with sex websites. In 2010, I had somebody come to me and they brought a handful of DVDs. And this person was in tears and she said, the person I'm dating, I found these under his bed. I need help. I need some advice. I want you to look at these things. And I said, right, is it going to put a virus on my computer? Because I go, no, don't worry. I need you to look at this. I need advice. I put the first disc in and it looked like it was young girls, students, in the bathroom. They were walking around half naked, or in their underwear. It was different properties.
Yeah.
And they were walking in and it looked like there were hidden mirrors, hidden cameras, either at the top of the mirrors in their bathrooms or, as I later discovered, cameras actually in the crease of the wall where you've got the wall meets the ceiling.
Yep.
That they are tiny. They're smaller than a pinhead.
Yep.
And I'm looking at these videos and I'm thinking, yeah, hang on a minute. These people, and I said, these are voyeuristic. I said, these girls don't know they're being watched. They're brushing their teeth, they're picking their, you're not going to pick your nose in front of a camera for everybody to, so they obviously didn't know the cameras were there.
Right.
And then I was shown videos of girls being raped. I was shown a video of a girl being murdered. And I said, this is a snuff movie. I said, this is not somebody acting. She's being murdered. And I said, right. I said, what you're showing me, this is all illegal. You need to go to the police. I said, where did you find these? And it was a girl that showed them to me. And she said, my boyfriend's got them. He's got hundreds of them in boxes under his bed. He works at the Navy base.
Wow.
He's a civilian worker at the Navy base in Helkston. I've checked the bank statements. It's a membership. It's a website. He's got a membership and he's paying. And this was back in 2010. This guy was paying £7 a month for the monthly membership to access the websites. And then for everything you want to download and copy onto disks or your computer or whatever, you have to pay for each download. But you get a monthly membership where you can view everything and sit there masturbating to it. But if you want to download it and keep it, it's an extra fee. It's a multi-million, multinational business. And it's all of us and our children.
Wow.
Students
Wow.
are a part of it. These people, this is part of what I've been investigating over the last 7 years. These guys have invested very heavily in rental properties. They own at least 80% of the private rental sector.
Yeah.
They've got at least 80% of it, and a lot of it is student accommodation all around the country. Those students are renting the properties. They're being spied on visually and audio wise. They've all got their own web pages. It's like a huge porn site. Pornhub
Yep.
is connected to these guys.
Yep.
And basically, they're all given their own web pages. I am listed under Christina Dundee because the man who's handling me, the Scottish police officer from the Met Police, is originally from the Dundee area. He's actually from a place called Roslin, which is near
Wow.
where he's. I've got so much information on this guy, and apparently, according to what this lot say, I'm the only person that's ever managed to name him, identify him, get witness. I mean, this man followed me over when I went in 2022. I decided to go over to Northern Ireland and I did a 6-month college degree. I thought, right, I'm going to go to university and do a journalism degree so I can expose everything that I'm learning. And I needed a level 3 degree to get me into university because obviously I'm not a school leaver. So I wanted to do something that I could use going forward with my ordinary life. Because I've been a healer for over 30 years, I thought, right, I've used massage with my healing since I started doing it. I'm very good at it. So I thought, right, if I get a qualification in, say, Swedish massage, I can then have the certificate for it so I can do that as well as my healing. I've never charged for my healing, and I don't, the lady that taught me, she never charged for her healing either. She said it's a gift and it should be free. If people want to give me a donation, that's fine. And she worked by that, and it's how I've always done things. So I thought, right, if I do the massage side of things, I can then run it as a business and start charging. And it'll get me into university. So I went over to Northern Ireland. The course there was, I think it was about £200, whereas over here it was going to cost me nearly £2,000. So I went over to Northern Ireland. I found a guy, ex-professor, and I stayed in his house out in the middle of nowhere in a place called Derry Gonnerly. It was lovely. And my family is originally on my dad's side, all from Ireland. So it was really nice. Just after I got there, I found an English £5 note dumped outside my bedroom window in the garden, buried in the grass. And I'm walking past with my dogs and I'm thinking, that's an English £5 note. We're in Northern Ireland. It's Irish money here. What the hell is that doing here? So I called out Guys, the old boy who ran the house. Now, it turned out he was actually targeted for 20 years and they murdered his wife.
Wow.
And he said, that's an English £5, very posh man. He said, that's an English £5 note. What's that doing here? And he said, bloody bastards. He said, I don't believe it. Now, I bought a car while I was there, a Peugeot, from a garage a week after I got there. I tried for 3 years to get finance for a car in England, and I couldn't get finance for anything at all. Not even 10 pence. When I went to Ireland, the first week I was there, I said to Guy, I'm going to need a car because my college is 11 miles away from where you live and I can't keep borrowing your car, so I'm going to have to get one. He said, right, we'll go to the garage. And I said, don't bother, I won't get finance. He said, try it. You might get lucky. I went to the garage. I said, I want that car and I want it on finance. He checked. It went through straight away. I was like, whoa. It went through. So he said, right, do you want to come back? It was a Friday. He said, do you want to come back on Monday and do the paperwork? I said, no, I want to do it now. I thought, I'm not giving anybody the chance to get in touch with you so you can change your mind. I want it done now.
Yep.
Right, well, now I'll come back and get the car on Monday. He said, okay, fine. So I did the paperwork. It all went through. That was it. The first night I took that car back, and this guy, he lived on a huge stretch of road, and it was in the middle of nowhere. It was so rural, most of the road didn't even have lines on it.
Yeah.
No houses. There was a bungalow next to him that was on a separate piece of land, and the guy was never there because he lived in Enniskillen with his girlfriend, so he wasn't there. There was a couple of cows that appeared in the field every now and again a donkey came in as well. Apart from that, there was nobody. It was a mile and a half up to Derrygomley village, but apart from that, there was nobody there. We were isolated. The first night I had my car there, we got up the next morning and I went to give Guy a lift into the village to get the paper. Somebody had tried to jemmy up my bonnet, and that was bent and the paint was scraped off. My windscreen wipers had been pulled out. I opened the car to find that my seat had been pulled all the way back. And I looked at Guy and I said, "Did you come out and get into the car last night?" He said, "No." I said, "Did you hear anything?" He said, "No, but the dog barked." He had a dog and I had my dogs there as well. I used to have 2 chihuahuas as well, but I had to get rid of them in 24. They couldn't find anywhere to live and I had to give them up. The university they'd let me have a cottage, but they only let me keep one dog, and it was all part of the targeting.
Yeah.
So anyway, it turned into a nightly thing where every night I would park the car, and every morning I'd get up, the seat had been moved, there was more damage to the car, and yeah, it just turned into a nightmare. Then, after a few weeks, and thankfully the first time it happened, I had Guy in the car with me. We're driving along the road at a normal speed. Next thing I know, a truck is coming towards me. I think it was the rubbish truck that was coming towards me. The steering wheel suddenly got snapped out of my hand. The car accelerated and pulled me onto the opposite side of the road towards the truck. And Guy screamed, and I pulled the steering wheel back, and we pulled over. And I said, "Jesus Christ, there must be a fault with the steering." We went back to the garage, Donnelly's. They came out an hour later and she said, "Right, our guys have had a look at it. We can't find any faults," because obviously they plug your car's computer system into their mainframe and it tells them if there's. She said, "Nothing's coming up on the system." 4 times I had to go back in about 5 weeks. It kept happening. And she said, "Right, this time they've taken the car out for a drive. There's nothing happening. We don't know what it is. There's no fault with the car." Basically, they tried to insinuate that it was me doing it.
Right.
Unfortunately, I didn't bother telling them that I had witnesses in the car more or less every time it happened. There were other people in the car with me. Then I started to look into, while I was over there, car computer systems. And then I found the driver assist mechanism, and I went back to the garage. And this time, one of the kids that was working in the front office was actually the nephew of the other lodger that was living in the house. And he said to me, "My nephew works in there." He said, "Don't speak to anybody else." He said, "I know what's going on with you." He said, "Go and speak to him, see if he can help." So I went in, and I did speak to somebody, and then they came back and said, "No, we're not going to look at it because there's nothing wrong with the car." As I was leaving, this guy chased me out and he said, "You're my uncle's friend. You live in the house with my uncle." And I said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "Right, what's going on with the car?" So I explained it. I said, "Right, it keeps trying to pull me into oncoming traffic. And if it's not trying to pull me into oncoming traffic, it keeps trying to drive me into the wall." And I said, "It's accelerating at the same time." And he said, "Right." He said, "Have you got the driver's assist mechanism turned off on the computer?" I said, "Yeah, it's the first thing I checked." And the driver assist is something that we have in cars now, and it started in 1989. That's when the patent was released for it. Basically what it does, it's a system within your car that the computer controls. If you go outside of the white lines, and it's usually for dual carriageways and motorways, freeways. And if you start to wander too close to the white line or go over it, it will gently steer you back into the middle of those white lines so you don't come out the lane and hit other traffic. Normally, you can disconnect that on your computer system. It gives you the option to have it turned on or off. And he said, "Is it turned off there?" I said, "Of course it is." And he said, "Right." He said, "I'm going to tell you something now." He said, with Peugeots and a lot of other cars, he said, underneath the steering wheel, there's 3 buttons here. He said, "This button disconnects the steering mechanism from the computer completely." He said, "Turning that off is not going to make any difference." He said, "The computer is telling you it's turned off. It's being overridden." He said, you need to push this button. That disconnects the entire steering mechanism and the acceleration from the computer. They can't fuck with you that way. He said, what you need to understand is, he said, you've upset the police, haven't you? And I said, how do you know that? He said, you're in Northern Ireland. He said, we are where everything was tested. He said, I can't get into my car and drive it without doing this. He said, there are so many of us. He said, they practiced all this shit on us over here before they launched it everywhere else.
Wow.
He said, they're trying to murder you. You do know that, don't you?
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, I do. I said, they already tried. I said, I had a car accident. Strangely enough, in January 2019, the day before they made me go for that assessment, on the M25, I had to come back down to Cornwall to get some of my dog's medication and some fresh clothes, and drove back down the day before my assessment so I could make the assessment. And on the way down, I was on the M25, which is a huge motorway in England, and it's just outside London. And in fact, it goes all the way around London as well. And I was on the M25, and all of a sudden, I came into the fast lane, and I was doing about 56 miles an hour. I had a BMW in front of me. A car then came into the middle lane and stayed beside me.
Yeah.
And a car came really close up behind me. So basically, I was one car, and there was a car in front, a car at the side, and a car. It's a police maneuver. It starts with B, but I can't remember what it's called now, but it's a particular police maneuver that they use for blocking people on motorways. They either block you to the central reservation, or they block you into the hard shoulder to stop you moving. For 2 miles, they kept me in this at 56 miles an hour. There was no traffic behind me. The traffic behind stopped. Now, the M25 is constantly always busy. It's one of the busiest roads in the UK. There was no traffic behind me. I didn't pay attention to what was happening. They were trying to send me to sleep at the wheel, which is another frequency they use to kill people at the wheel.
Yeah.
So many whistleblowers have been killed that way. Oh, they fell asleep at the wheel. No, they didn't. They were frequency. Trust me.
Yeah.
I did a post on it for truckers because there were a lot of truck drivers that this was tested on, and they still mess with them. Where trucks, suddenly the truck driver fell asleep at the wheel. No, they didn't. They were frequencied. Their targets. Basically, what they did, or what they planned to do, they were going to snap the steering out of my control and bang me into the central reservation. And I think what they were trying to do was create a situation where they could accuse me of causing an accident because I was mentally ill, so they could section me. Because this was before they sectioned me.
Right.
2 months before they did it.
Yeah.
Just a month before they did it. But I think that was their first attempt at doing it. And it failed. What happened was, I think just as they were about to do it, I used to drive in flip-flops, which apparently I found out now is illegal. I didn't realise it was illegal. I'm a bit of a hippie, really. And my flip-flops were so old, the little grommet on the bottom of it had worn down so much, it pinged out of the hole.
Yeah.
Just as they were about to do what they were doing, this is spirit looking after me.
Yep.
My flip-flop broke, and the strap wrapped. I had an automatic car. My strap wrapped around both the pedals. So as I'm trying to free it with my foot, thinking, shit, trying to free it with my foot, and I couldn't get the strap off the pedals, and it started to make my car speed up. I've leaned down, got my hand on the steering, so I've leaned down to try and grab the flip-flop. As I've done that, I thought at the time that I must have pulled down on the steering wheel as I was leaning to the side to get my flip-flop, and driven myself into the central reservation. I realised now they took over my steering and did that. This was in 2019. My car overturned. My tyre rode up. I clipped the bumper of the BMW in front very gently. My tyre rode up the central reservation post, and it turned my car over. And I then slid over all 4 lanes of the motorway and came to rest fully and straight in the hard shoulder. It's impossible, but it happened. The car that was behind me pulled up behind me. The only thing I was worried about was my Chihuahua dogs. I'm looking for my dogs. I crawled out of the window. My car was completely crushed. Totally fucked. I crawled out of the door, and the guy said, "Oh my God, you all right? You're all right. I've called the emergency services." And I said, "Don't worry about me. Find my dogs. And all of a sudden, the traffic started coming back onto the motorway from behind me. It had obviously been slowed down.
Yeah.
Traffic started speeding up. I said, don't worry about me. Find my dogs. I'm fine. Just find my dogs. My dogs were cowering in the back of the car. So we sorted the dogs out. Less than a minute, a police car arrived. And straight behind him, an ambulance.
Yeah.
It was less than a minute.
Yeah.
So then obviously he'd been holding the traffic back with traffic signs and were waiting for this to happen. It was all planned.
Yeah.
Had I broken the strap on my shoe, I think it would have been a lot worse. But they took me to the hospital. They sat me in the back of the ambulance for half an hour. It was almost, at the time, I'm thinking, why aren't we going? You know, I'm ready to leave. This old boy in the car behind me, I was on my way back to my sister's. He said, where are you going? I said, I'm on my way back down to Hastings to see my sister. And he said, oh, we're going to Hastings. Do you want us to drop your dogs to your sister's? You can't take them to the hospital with you and you can't leave them in the car. It's wrecked. And I said, yes, that would be really nice. So I rang my sister and I said, right, I've had a car accident. I've got 2 people that are going to drop the dogs off. Their names were never taken. They didn't give the police a statement. I can't find any information for any phone calls for any emergency services.
Wow.
I went to the hospital. They made me wait in the ambulance for half an hour on the hard shoulder and then drove me to the hospital, obviously, because they needed to cover the amount of time it would have taken for the ambulance to arrive on the M25 and then take me to the hospital. They needed that extra half an hour. That's why they stalled it. When I got to the hospital, they kept me there for over 3 hours and made me have a psychological evaluation. That's all they wanted me there for.
Right.
I had internal bruising that was killing me. I wasn't x-rayed. I wasn't scanned. A nurse came in and physically checked me over, and then they made me wait 3 hours to have a psychological evaluation. And when the doctor came down, it was a head psychiatrist, he came down and he said, oh, this is it. And he took one look at me and he said, why have they asked me to come and see you? I said, I don't know. What department are you from? He said, the psychiatric department. So I have no idea. And he asked me a few questions. He was really angry. He said, I can't believe they've dragged me down here he said, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not mentally ill. Why the bloody hell have they dragged me down? I was really busy. He was really irritated. And he went, there's no record of that examination. I've asked that hospital 4 times in subject access requests. There's no trace of me being examined by that man. I think the whole thing was set up because that's when they were going to try and section me. And that's why they waited until I went back to Cornwall and then dreamt up this whole thing.
Yeah.
And then did it that way. But if I'd been sectioned off that highway, I don't think anybody would ever have seen me again.
Yeah.
And I discovered when I was released from the hospital in March 2019, and I asked for records, I asked for the medical records in June 2019. I sent a request down to hospital and said, right, I want all the records. I asked for the police records. The police stalked me for 16 months, but the NHS had to give me the records straight away. And what I found was just mind-boggling for what people had made up. There are so many different versions for what appear to be the same event. It's just fucking unreal that they managed to get away with it and put it in a set of records.
Right.
That I started to realize none of it's official. I'm not on the official systems. I was never registered in the hospital systems, on the computer systems, as being a patient. And the records themselves have confirmed that. They've got the wrong address. Apparently, I was living in my sister's house in Hastings. This was before I moved back to Sussex.
Yeah.
Apparently, I was living in my sister's house in Hastings with a home phone number in Cornwall and a GP in Cornwall. It's not possible. Apparently, I did have my dogs with me when I was sectioned, and they were taken into a sectioning suite with me. This is one doctor. It was all handwritten. There's nothing printed out on a computer. It's all been handwritten.
Yeah.
According to the police, the ambulance said that I was living at my sister's house in Hastings with a phone number in Cornwall and a GP in Cornwall. The police said I was at no fixed address, even though 4 days beforehand they'd been at my house in Boscastle and made a report for it, but they put me down as no fixed address. Again, this is what they try to do: section people, homeless, mentally ill.
Yes.
Then there was a story that apparently I'd been driving around the country for days, living in my car with my dogs, and I've actually got shopping receipts that prove I was nowhere else apart from Cornwall, in the vicinity of my house and in the vicinity of my daughter's house, doing shopping for her. And then there's another police report that says, no, the dogs didn't go to the hospital with her. The dogs were actually dropped off to a friend of hers, and they've put a woman down that I've never met, don't know, and in a town I'd never been to. When the doctor said the dogs were at the hospital and put in the suite with me, and I also apparently attacked the police officers when I was taken to the hospital, but I was never taken to that hospital. I was taken to a disused hospital unit and then to another hospital 30 miles away. They just made up 2 days worth of records for another hospital to try and create a picture of me being seriously mentally ill.
Yeah.
But the NHS computer system itself specifies I was never in that hospital. I'm only registered as being at the other hospital, but not on the computer system because nobody put me down as a patient. And this is what happens when people are targeted and sent to these hospitals being sectioned. I don't think people are being put on the official hospital register because we're dealt with separately. And I've realized over the last 7 years of me investigating all this and how it's done, I keep coming up with the same things. And that is all of these organizations have got two registers. There's the normal system that works for people that aren't being heavily targeted.
Yeah.
And there's a separate system that deals with people who are targeted, with blacklisted. I also discovered estate agents while I was trying to find properties to rent. I found that I was being put into a separate system with the estate agents where I would go in and ask about a property and they'd look on the computer system and it would come up as, oh, she's one of those, don't rent her a property. You're blacklisted. And I proved it by getting in touch with an estate agent I registered with 3 years ago. And I got in touch with them last year. And it was a young kiddie. He was obviously new. He hadn't been working there long because it was normally a woman that I spoke to. But this young kiddie answered the phone and I gave him my name and he said, oh, you're not on the system. Have you registered with us? I said, yeah. I said, I came in and sat in the office and registered. I gave him my name, my date of birth, my address, my phone number, my email address. He said, that's really weird. Who did you speak to? I gave him the name of the woman that put all my details in the system. And he said, when was the last time you spoke to us? I said, about 3 months ago. It was her I spoke to. She found me. Blah, blah. And he said, it's just really weird. He said, I can't find you anywhere. And then he said, hang on a minute. I'll just look in this. And he came up and he spoke. He obviously didn't mean to, but he talked out loud. He went, oh, she's in that file.
Oh.
What was that? He said, oh, nothing. He said, no, I found you. You were on a different system. He said, no, I'm really sorry. We haven't got anything at the moment.
Yeah.
Call back. And I put the phone down and I thought, fuck me, I'm right. They have got 2 systems in place with all these organizations. Same with the council, the local council. If I ring the council for help with anything, I get messed about, fucked around, and it won't help me.
Yep.
So I now go through one particular woman who was obviously new when she started working with me for something that I needed help with. And she was brilliant. It took me less than 5 minutes. One phone call, a year worth of aggravation and hassle was sorted out in 5 minutes with one phone call. And she confirmed some other stuff for me as well. So now if I've got anything, I just go straight through to her. I bypass everybody else and I just go straight for that woman because I know that because she's already helped me,
Yeah.
it's going to cause too many problems for them to stop that now. So I just go through her and make sure that I can get it all sorted. But it's, you know, there's just so much.
I know.
I mean, in 2010, when we came back down from London, you know, I told you my daughter wanted to finish her college in London, so we moved up for a year. Nearly killed me. When I came back down in 2010, I was friendly with a Bangladeshi guy. Now, the guy that owned the restaurant and his wife used to be our neighbours when we first moved to Cornwall. And I was always really friendly with them. And I love Indian food. We used to go and have restaurant food quite often and takeaways at least once a week. We had a takeaway at least once a week for quite some time. And I was friends with the owner. I was friends with his wife. I was friends with his kids. And one of the guys that worked in his restaurant, Ali, was a really nice guy. We were just friends. And he was really bored during the day. And I used to take my dog for long walks. It was my Jack Russell got murdered in 2018. In 2010, obviously, he was still alive. And I ended up saying to him, I said, look, you know, if you're it got stuck in the afternoon. I said, I go down to Penrose to walk the dog. It's a good hour and a half walk. I said, if you want to come down with something to do, you're welcome to join me, just as friends, you know. And we spent about 6 months, and we kind of built up a friendship and kind of semi started dating. He was a Muslim. There was no sex before marriage. You know, we canoodled a bit. That was it. And I was happy with that. I didn't really want to go the full blown hog, blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden he started talking about being worried about being deported. And I said, well, aren't you legal here? And he said, oh, yeah, I'm legal here. He even came and showed me some documentation, allegedly from the Home Office, saying that he'd been legal for 6 years. And I never thought any more of it. And he said, you know, I'm really worried. I think they might be trying to deport me. And I said, well, they can't do that. You've shown me the paperwork. You're legal. This went on for 3 or 4 months. And he kept building up this fear scenario. I'm so frightened they're going to send me back home. I think I must have upset somebody and they're going to try to deport me. And I said, but they can't do that. I wasn't looking into it, and I still knew nothing about any of this program. Next thing I know, he then started telling me, you know, if they send me back. And I said, well, what would happen if you had to go back? And he said, well, I own a big property with my brother in Dhaka in Bangladesh. He said, it's a big building full of apartments. And our relationship started to change. He started getting more serious and talking about wanting a serious relationship and the possibility of us getting married. And I said, well, you know, I don't really want to go down that route. Maybe sometime in the future we really get on with each other. I said, but I'm just happy with the way things are at the moment. And he was building this up and building it up, and about this money that he's got in Bangladesh and this, you know, apartment block he owns that he's building with his brother. And if I did go back, I'd just start a business and I've got somewhere to live. And then there's my parents' property in the village, and we've got a villa next to the river. And he built all this lovely picture. By July 2011, I got a screaming phone call from the owner of the restaurant. They'd all been arrested. He said, I've been raided. And he said, a load of my staff have been arrested and they're at the detention centre for deportation, and Ali is one of them. I was beside myself. Obviously, it was all a setup. This was all part of the targeting. It's where it started.
Yeah.
When that police officer came down to see me from London in 2005 and I refused to perform a certain act, I realised now that in small increments, he started to destroy my life. He wanted me to suck his cock. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I said, you're here for a massage. You've had your massage, and I'm not doing that. It's not something that I do. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And he asked his money back. And I said, no, you've had your massage. You've paid for your massage. I'm not giving you your money back because you want me to do something I'm not going to do.
Yeah.
It's not. But I realise, looking back at what happened afterwards, it was small, unnoticeable increments, really serious stuff that had serious effects on my life. But it was done so far apart, I didn't link it all. And it was connected to the guy that was putting the cameras in my houses. The Navy guy that was putting the cameras in my houses.
Yeah.
Anyway, the owner of the restaurant, he said, can you come up to the house? I'll come down and collect you. He said, no, I won't. I'll send my wife down. He sent his wife down. She collected me in the car. I went up to the house and I started crying. I said, Jesus. I said, he's lived over here for years. He's not going to survive back in Bangladesh. And he said, no. He said, and on top of that, he said, I can't run my businesses without him. He's my manager. I can't run my businesses without him. We need him back here. What? So it was all set up. I've spent my life helping people. I'm a healer. I've always been I'm an empath as well. So I feel people's emotions, vibrations, everything else. If I can help somebody, I will go out of my way to do it. That's my nature. It's the kind of person I am. And they knew that I'd do it. So now I can see clearly what happened, the fact that I was totally set up.
Yeah.
But I had no idea. So I'm going along with it. I'm sitting there crying and I'm saying, oh my God, what are we going to do? How are we going to get him back? He's got paperwork that he's legal. They actually agreed to go and see a senior immigration solicitor up in Exeter, I think it was. I showed her this document. It was a fake document But she looked at it. She was obviously involved with bloody Freemason and being a lawyer. But she said, oh, yes, this is illegal, all right. He's here illegally. That they've deported him illegally. We must fight this. It was her that said, the only way you're going to get him back into this country is to go to Bangladesh and marry him. I went, what? Would I be able to do that? And she said, yes. She said, but it's the only way you're going to get him back. The only way that you can be able to get him back in this country after he's been deported is as a spouse. And she said, you'll have to go over, marry him. You'll have to have, obviously he's Muslim, you'll have to have a Muslim ceremony. Then you'll have to ceremony at the court so that you can have the documents registered in the UK with the Home Office. You fill in the application and have him brought back into the UK as your spouse. And I said, will that work? She said, yes. I said, right, fine, that's what we'll have to do then. So I then went back to the owner and sat in a meeting with him and his wife. They showed me loads of documents for all their businesses. It's all in their children's names and tax evasion, all kinds of shit that they shouldn't have shown me, that I remember.
Yeah.
And I was talking to them and I said, right. He said, what did the solicitor say? I said, basically, the only way that we're going to get him back into the UK is if I go to Bangladesh and marry him and then apply to bring him back into the UK as my spouse. And I said, we'll have to live together for at least a year or two for it to pass. And then we can go our separate ways. And he said, are you willing to do that? And I said, look, they've deported him illegally. I got my local MP involved to try to stop the plane taking him out of the country. My local MP had no idea what was going on. He tried to stop it, thinking he was helping me. Anyway, I said, well, there isn't anything else we can do. So it was all arranged. He paid for the flights and everything. Now it fell right at the same time that my daughter was giving birth to my first grandchild.
Oh.
They made sure I was out of the country for the birth of my first grandchild. And they made sure that when my second grandchild was born, all this shit was going on. So I wasn't there for that either. So we flew over to Bangladesh. Everything seemed fine. They came over with their youngest son, who screamed the entire way until I took him off his mother and sat him on my knee, and he was deadly silent. He went to sleep, he smiled at me, and he went to sleep. And after that, I was the one that had to look after the son because I was the only one that he'd stopped crying for. We got to Bangladesh. It basically 2 days of traveling. We got to Bangladesh. When we landed and came into the entry lounge, he took my passport off me. He said, you need to give me your passport. I have to keep it safe. So my passport was taken off me. It was about 2:00 in the morning when we arrived. We went to the house. Oh, my God. When we arrived, it was a building site with a couple of properties. The outside of the building was standing and ready. There were 2 apartments in it that were ready to live in, and the rest of it was just a bomb site still being built. I took one look at it, and have you ever seen Bangladesh? Think of the poorest parts of India. Those. This was what I was looking at, and I'm thinking, is this what he was describing? This is not what he was describing. Oh my God. I know I've been lied to. From that moment, I know, shit, what is going on? I've been lied to. There's obviously some kind of con job going on here, and I'm going to end up getting the blame. I was instantly worried. We went into the building. His elder brother was there, who was a solicitor, with his wife and his young child. And the mother was also living there as well. She took an instant dislike to me because I was English and not Muslim, and started crapping on the spot. Wherever I stood, she'd come and stand next to me, take a crap, walk away and leave it on the floor next to me.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, I was told to get some sleep. I slept for 2 hours, barely. Then I was woken up and said, right, we have to get ready for the wedding now. It's 4:00 in the morning. We have to get ready for the wedding now. There are some Thai girls coming to do your makeup and do your henna. I said, what henna? And they painted my arms and my hands with all the henna. And I had loads of shit put on my face, which I washed off. I mean, the sponges alone were horrific. Anyway, they put all this stuff on my face. I looked like an indescribable painted doll that looked something like it was in a horror movie. Took one look. He said, "Oh, you look beautiful." I took one look at myself in the mirror. There's no fucking way I'm going out in public looking like it was not like my 3-year-old grandchild had painted my face.
Yeah.
I washed it all off and put some mascara on. And I said, "Look, I'm really sorry, but this is it. And this henna thing is it. I'm not doing any more." They put me in a sari, stood me in the lounge and took loads of photographs with the family, with the restaurant owner standing there with his hand on his dick, which I thought was quite strange.
That is weird.
Yeah. Well, now I realise it was some sort of sign for the photographs. But by 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the morning, we left to go to the Imam's office, where I had to recite a load of Arabic stuff and a thumbprint, and that was it. I was married. Then we were driven to another part of the town, to the courthouse, where his brother, the solicitor, was waiting for us. I didn't sit at the desk at all to talk to the courthouse manager, obviously the judge. It was the restaurant owner and my husband who sat there filling in the paperwork. They changed my name. They gave me a Muslim name. Apparently I'm called Salma now. And I was just asked to sign it. Now, the thing is, before this wedding took place, when I was woken up and got out of bed, I actually said to the wife, the restaurant owner's wife, who I was friends with, and I said to her, "Look, I've realised something isn't right here and I've been lied to." I said, "What he told me about this property is a complete lie. What he told me about being legal in the UK is obviously a lie, because they wouldn't have deported him if he was legal.
Yeah.
It's illegal for them to do that." And I said, "Look, I know something is wrong. I don't want to go through with this. I don't want to get married." And she looked at me and she said, "I'm sorry, I can't help you. You have to get married. If you refuse to do this, they're going to change your passport photo for somebody else's, and they will get married and bring him into the UK under your name, and you'll never see your family again."
Wow.
And I looked at her and I said, "Are you telling me that I'm going to be murdered if I don't go ahead with this?" She said, "I'm so sorry, I can't help you." I was forced to get married, basically. After the wedding, we went back to the flat. I was told to grab my bag. We were then driven to Sylhet, another part of Bangladesh, which is about, I think it's about 5-hour journey. A horrific 5-hour journey, I have to say. The roads are dreadful. And I then spent 2 weeks being driven around various villages, having my photograph taken with hundreds of children. It was fucking weird. It was mainly children that I was photographed with. And I turned round to him and I said, "Am I going to be expected to adopt some children or something?" And he just looked at me and started laughing. He said, "Well, we might have a few. We might bring a few back." It was just really weird.
Yeah.
When we were coming home, he had me fill in some documentation, which I had no intention of handing in. When we got to the airport, he gave me my passport back. He said, "There's your passport." When we got to Heathrow, he said, "Right, me and the wife, we're going here." He said, "You go that way." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Just don't walk with us." He said, "I've got stuff in my bag that won't go through customs. I don't want to get stopped." And they shut off. There was a customs man waiting, and he was standing there staring straight at me. And as much as I tried to avoid him, he walked in front of me and basically directed me into the back. And I'm thinking, I've got 2 cartons of cigarettes in my suitcase for somebody else. They're not mine. They asked me to carry them. And I knew that you're only allowed to bring 1 carton in. And I'm thinking, shit, I'm going to get arrested for bringing cigarettes in that aren't even mine, because they didn't want them in their bag. So the first thing I said was, "Look, there's 2 cartons of cigarettes in this bag. I'm carrying them for the other person I came back with, for somebody else. I don't smoke." He put his hand on my suitcase. He said, "I'm not interested in your cigarettes. I want to know about your husband."
Uh-oh.
Now, I hadn't even lodged any paperwork. How did he know that I'd got married? Now, at the time, I questioned it, and I'm thinking, well, it must have gone through a system somewhere. Of course, now I realise it was all part of the targeting thing. It was meant to scare me. Everything they do has an element of fear, anxiety, or terror.
Yes.
Or all 3.
Yes.
Everything they do.
Yes.
I explained what had happened. I said, "Look, I was forced to get married. I didn't want to do it. this is how the situation arose. This is how the situation ended. And I'm going to be contacting a solicitor to get all this annulled. It's 13 years later and I'm still married.
Oh,
I
wow.
can't get, I can't. 2 solicitors firms went out of business as soon as they started representing me for my divorce. They shut down and disappeared. Then the papers disappeared. Then the wedding certificates disappeared. It took me until 2023 to find a way to get a copy of the original paperwork that was lodged with the court before the solicitor's firm shut down and he vanished. And I only got 1 wedding certificate. I can't get the Home Office. Now, I was involved with the Home Office when I got back. I was having about 6 weeks of negotiations with them to try and get it annulled. And they said I wasn't entitled to an annulment. Realised now that I was, because it was a forced marriage and I fell right into that category and it should have been annulled straight away.
Yeah.
I can't get the Home Office to talk to me. I can't get solicitors to talk to me. I can't get the Divorce Advice Centre from the British court system. They won't answer my emails. They won't answer my phone calls. The Home Office won't give me any information, even though there is meant to be documentation lodged with them. Nobody will talk to me. And after 13 years, I'm still married to this bastard. Now, I then found out, I managed to get one of the restaurant workers to talk to me in 2023. And he said, look, I'm not allowed to talk to you. And I said, I want to know where Ali is, because I can't get divorced on my own without a solicitor, without knowing where he lives, because I have to serve him with the papers for him to agree to it. And he said, you're never going to get that. He said, he's living in Thailand. He said, after you came back to England, I spent 2 years with him threatening to murder me and my daughter if I didn't go ahead with bringing him back to the UK. I had to go into hiding for 2 years. And he said to me, look, a lot of this, he said, I can't explain to you. He said, but you were lied to. I said, I know I was lied to. He said, they moved up to London. The restaurant owner and his wife and the children moved up to London straight after we got back. And they were paid a lot of money. He said, you were lied to. I said, oh, no. He said, after you came back to England, he said, Ali moved to Thailand. He's got married to one of the Thai women that was doing your makeup. They've got 2 children and he owns a restaurant. I said, where the fuck did he get the money? He didn't have the money to open a restaurant. And he just said again, you were lied to. He said, I can't tell you any more than that and I have to go now. He said, don't come back to the restaurant. So that was when I realised it was all part the targeting thing. I answered somebody on Substack a few days ago about an immigration thing. And I mentioned, and I said, I went to Bangladesh. I know about this immigration thing. And I put it, I restacked it in my notes so that people can actually see it. I think only one person's looked at it because it's shadow banned, but it's in there. I describe what happened in that bit and the fact that I found out there is a huge ring. That restaurant owner, when he was raided, there were at least 6 illegals living in his property and working in his restaurants. He was never arrested. They were deported. He was never arrested. He was never questioned. He wasn't fined. His restaurants weren't closed down and he's still operating those rental properties.
Wow.
With Bangladeshis living in them.
Yeah.
His nephew, is completely illegal and is still here living and working in his restaurants. The police know all about this. The immigration know all about it. Nobody's done anything. So he was let off with all of this to target me for them.
Yeah.
And I wrote about it in that piece that I put on Substack. And this is part of what I'm going to be exposing this year. And I'm going to use the newly formed political party Restore. They're all fully on this illegal immigration thing. And I've said, I've got information for something that's going on with illegal immigration that involves the immigration department and police officers. Not only are police officers involved in the rape gangs, they're also involved in illegal immigration.
Yeah, makes sense. It's all connected.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they've got their fingers in all kinds of pies. They're also committing crimes by setting sitters. They're actually called sitters. The people that they hire on housing estates and stuff to target other people, they're called sitters because basically what they do is they sit on you. They monitor your internet use, they monitor your phone use, they follow you places, they target your pets, they target your gardens, they target your car. They're called sitters because they basically are paid to sit on you. And they can be paid anything from £100 to £1,000 a week, depending on what it is they're doing for the police and whether or not they're related to anybody that's running the programs.
Wow.
If they're a relative of somebody, they get paid £1,000 a week. And a lot of the time, if they're involved in some serious work for them, they will get paid with investments where they can get 100, 150,000 invested for them with an investment company outside of the United Kingdom, usually Florida. There's a huge connection between the English side and the American side and Florida.
Yeah.
And what we find is there's a lot of ex-army guys working for the targeting program from the UK that are actually based in Florida.
Wow.
And a lot of them have been over there since the 90s. Now, one of them is called Perry, and I had a thing about him when I was 15 and 16 in the town where I grew up in Hastings. My elder brothers were friends with the group of guys that served in the Falklands War. And these guys, a lot of them were in their 20s and up to about 30, 34 years old. But I knew them all because they all used to use the pubs and the nightclubs that me and my friends used to go to at 15 and 16 years old. You know, it was a very small town, and it was, you know, we used to go and have a boogie and a couple of drinks and then go home. Or we played Space Invaders on the video machines in the pub while we were waiting to go and dance at the nightclub, and then we'd go home. And these guys used to walk me home to make sure I got home safe because they all knew my brothers. These are the same guys that are now working for the targeting program. Now, one of them I've heard on the V2K talking, Perry, and I hear this lot talk. Oh my God, she looks just the same as she did when she was 16. I heard him, and I'm thinking, I recognise that voice. That's fucking Perry. See, I spent 2-3 years mixing with these people. They're younger brothers. I used to roller skate with their younger brothers. I've got photographs of these guys stalking me. You know, some of them are here, some of them are in the States, some of them are in Spain. It's huge.
Yes.
The British guys have got people running in Florida. They've got people running in Spain. I also found one of the places I'm being logged in from infrequently, Czechia. And it kept popping up, and it started popping up in 2020. And I was logging it through my Yandex account. I was also logged in from Washington, which corresponded to, this is how I worked out that the diplomatic protection and royal protection armed police officers from the Met are heavily, heavily involved at the top layer of the targeting program in the UK. And obviously, if the ministers go abroad, their Metropolitan Police Officer protection units go with them. So every time a certain minister was going over to Washington, my accounts were being logged in from Washington, and it was the coppers that were working as his security detail that are attached to the targeting program that were monitoring me from the States.
Wow.
And my Yandex account let me track it. Not only that, it let me track the IP address, the device that was used, and the operating system, so I can prove who it was. And I've checked with all the government ministers on the dates and times that I was logged in from Washington, and it happened 3 times over a 4-year period. I traced it back to the exact minister that was in Washington at the exact time. So we can trace it back. When this does come to court, I can trace back to the security detail from the Met that was with that particular minister in Washington when I was logged in from Washington. So I fucked. I basically spent 7 years acting like a police officer.
Yeah.
And what I've done, I traced them back through their own movements to what they're involved in. I've found 101 companies listed on the Companies House website. And these guys basically, it's like I said before, basically we have a system in this country where if you're a Freemason and you're in business and you're attached and friends with these guys, that's all right. You don't have to pay your taxes. We'll just leave that to the idiots that don't know how everything works.
Exactly.
None of these Freemasons, some of them have been operating for over 30 years and they've never paid a penny in taxes.
Yeah.
One of them has got a helicopter on his front lawn, and yet he hasn't got enough money to pay his taxes.
Mm-hmm.
Tax exempt, tax exempt, tax exempt. It's all over the place. We've got a senior ex-police officer from Cornwall who used to be a senior police officer in the Met, and he was involved. I did a post in, I think it was in 2024, about the Ghost Squad. And it was a specialised police unit that was opened up in the early 90s to investigate a unit of the Metropolitan Police called the Flying Squad. And they were basically, it was a criminal gang organisation run by police officers, which is basically what the targeting programme is. It's basically the British police are the biggest criminal organisation we've got in the country.
Yes.
And I started to investigate what was going on with all these businesses. And it's mind-boggling. This senior officer, he used to be one of the chief constables for Cornwall, Devon and Cornwall Police. He's an ex-Met officer. Very illustrious career. He's got medals coming out of every orifice. He's now involved with, get this, an anti-trafficking and anti-slavery charity.
Oh, no.
This is how they give themselves credibility with the public, so you never suspect them of doing anything. The man is one of the biggest criminals in the United Kingdom. And the woman that's chairing it with him is also still involved with the police, and she's meant to be overseeing what the police do. And she's involved with these charities.
Yeah. It's the same here in the US. If they try to spin it off as being humanitarians, and they're not.
No, not at all. That basically, all these businesses are being used for fronts for criminal activity.
Correct.
And it's being done right under our noses. Yeah. This is why Rupert Lowe, who's formed Restore Britain rather, a political party, a new political party. It's been 4 weeks and he's got over 115,000 paid up members now. There's no way that he's not going to get into power. I think they'll have to kill him to stop it.
Yeah.
But the problem is,
hopefully not.
Well, I hope not. But he's hitting hard on the immigration side of things, and I've got so much information for them on that. And also, Andrew Bridgen is an ex-Conservative MP who, during COVID, he was still with the Conservatives when COVID hit, and then he started to realise that it was a con and that people were being poisoned and people were dying after the injections. And some of his friends were affected by it, and he started voicing his opinions. And he's done some interviews recently. One was just a few weeks ago that I watched, where he talks about the fact that he was visited whilst he was still an MP and basically told, and they said to him, name your price. He said, what do you mean? And they said, name your price. You can have anything you want, but you've got to stop talking about the COVID. And he said, what do you mean anything I want? And they said, name your price. You can have anything you want. And he said, this is how it's going to be. And they said, this is how it's always been. This is politics. Name your price. What do you want to stop talking about COVID? And he said, I can have anything I want. And they said, anything you want. He said, I want the Prime Minister's resignation. And they said, you can't have that. And he said, well, if I can't have that, there's nothing you can do for me. So I'll carry on doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
He had no intention of stopping. He just wanted to test it. And they said, you can't have that. But he said, basically, politics is dirty. They buy everybody off their silence. And that's how it works. He's obviously not a Freemason. Now, this man was running a business with a 30 million turnover. Very successful business. He became an MP by funding himself. He didn't have any taxpayer funding. He didn't have any donors or anything. He paid for it himself. And he wanted, where he lives is in Leicester, and it was one of the poorest areas of the entirety of the county of Leicester. And he completely turned it around. He became their MP. It's now one of the most prosperous places in Leicester and one of the nicest places to live there. And when he refused, and he started campaigning for the COVID and trying to expose the lies, he was thrown out of the Conservative Party. Then, all of a sudden, his wife decided she was going to divorce him. And he's openly talked about this a few weeks ago in this interview. I think I shared it on my Substack page.
Yeah, I watched it.
He said his wife then decided she was going to divorce him. He was blacklisted from every solicitor in the UK. Couldn't get anybody to represent him for his divorce. This is a successful businessman and an ex-Conservative MP. And he said I was blacklisted. And I actually laughed and shouted at the screen when he said it. And I said, welcome to the club. We all are. And he said, and then my family, and this was the bit that really got me. He said, then my family, he said, I have a business with a 30 million turnover and it's still turning that over. He said, my family took my business off me. And he said, I'm completely targeted. And I thought, oh my God, this was a turning point for me because I thought, right. And then he said, and Rupert Lowe, he said, I've joined Restore Britain. He said, I thought long and hard about it and I've joined the party. He said, I believe in Rupert. He said, that poor man is now being targeted because he's bucking the system.
Yeah.
And I thought, what? I thought, this is it. We are now on our way. With the Epstein, such a lot is going to happen this year.
I
Kimberly,
know.
such
I
a lot.
know. It's going to end.
Epstein files being released where it's not only the paedophilia that's being exposed, but he's was involved in the targeting program.
Yes.
Now, in 2020, I think it was the end of 2020, the beginning of 2021, I inadvertently stumbled across a video online, which I kept the link for. It's in my iPad. So my iPad battery has been drained because they were deleting stuff and it drained the battery and I can't get it to charge, but the information is still in there so I can get to it. It was a video of Epstein on his island. There was a very young blonde girl who was naked. They were in the grounds in front of that temple. There were some men standing at her head and she was naked on the ground and she was basically staked. She was tied and they put wooden stakes in the ground. And she was tied with her arms and legs spread out, naked. He was kneeling in front of her with what looked like an Xbox game controller type thing in his hands.
Yeah.
And he said something to God. The volume was too low. I couldn't hear anything. But he said something to the guys and then he laughed. And it was something like, watch this. And he flicked a switch and her entire hip and genital area launched off the floor. And you could see she was screaming. And it lasted for about 10 seconds. And then he flicked the switch and she fell back to the floor.
Yeah.
Visibly distressed and in pain. And all the men were laughing. And I saw this in this video a couple of times. And I knew straight away what I was looking at because I'd already found the microchip.
Yeah.
When I moved back to Hastings in 2019 after this hospital thing, I moved back down in May. A couple of months after I got back, I'd already bumped into the old family friend, the engineer, and he was helping me try and work things out. And that was when I realized it was all police and everything else. I then bumped into a couple of friends that I grew up with. And one of them was friends with my brother who was murdered in 1995, sorry. And we hadn't seen each other since I was like 18. And he came over to my place and we had a coffee and, we were talking about my brother and memories and this, that, and the other. And we kind of semi-dated, but not. But I said to him, look, I need your help with something. I knew I had something in my vagina because by then they'd started waking me up every night. And I was waking up listening to somebody say, right, here we go, come on. And then I all of a sudden launch into an orgasm. Oh God, it was just so distressing, really awful. Yeah. And then they started doing it all day. And then it started to get to the point where they were doing it so much, it felt like somebody was sticking a rod up through my cervix and into my stomach. It was so painful. It was unbelievable. They were doing it when I was walking my dogs. They were doing it when I was in shops. It was dreadful. And the man that was putting the cameras in my house, I kept hearing his voice as one of the operators for this chip thing. I think what it is, I think they're iPhone vibration chips. And they've got their tiny little 3-4 millimeter green NFC chips. And they've got hooks on the side that's obviously bending them in and they're hooking them into your skin. And I said to him, the things I've had to do, I said, I need your help with something. He said, what? I said, I need, I'm going to have to be descriptive here.
Okay.
I said to him, I need you to put your fingers inside me and have a feel around. And he kind of looked at me, his eyes lit up, bless him. He's been trying to sleep with me since I was 17 years old. My brother told him he wasn't allowed to touch me. And he actually made a point of telling me, he said, your brother said I'm not allowed to touch you. And I said, my brother's dead and I need your help. I said, I'm not asking you to give me an orgasm. There's something in there and I need you to get it out. And he went, what? I thought I was talking about a tampon. I said, no, it's not that. I said, look. Anyway, he was feeling around. It was very painful. I mean, before they got me in that hospital and raped me, I'd actually been celibate for 12 years. I hadn't done anything with anybody since 2010. And I kind of said to him, right, I need you to feel around my G-spot. And he said, oh, that's weird. I said, what? He said, I can feel something. It's scratchy. And I said, is that the only thing you can feel? And he said, there's a couple of other bits that feel wrong. He said, it feels like there's something long in there, like a rod. He said, there's two of them. I said, okay, don't worry about that. Just concentrate on the G-spot scratchy thing. We were there for nearly an hour. My God, I was so sore. We were there for nearly an hour and he said, I've almost got it. He said, no, I can't. He said, it keeps slipping away. I can't. He said, I'm almost getting it. I said, look, just dig your fingernail underneath. He said, I've got no fingernails. I bite them. And then in the end, I was so sore we had to give up. I said, okay, fine, stop. I can't do this anymore. Anyway, he said he said, that's one of the weirdest things I've ever had to do in my entire life. And I said, look, I'm really sorry. I said, I needed your help. Well, anyway, he left. I went over to see my sister in Hastings. I was out in the sticks in the countryside. I went down to see my sister. I was so sore. I said to my sister, I told her about it. And I told her about it before and said, I'm going to try and get this thing out, whatever it is. And I said to my sister, this is what I've just done. She said, did you manage to get it out? I said, no. I said, I'm so sore. I said, can I use your shower? I just need to hold a cold shower on it. Try and numb everything. I'm so sore. And of course, down there's nothing really you can put on to stop pain.
Right.
She said, yeah, no problem. She had the towels on the rail, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, my sister was in the kitchen and her bathroom was right next door to the kitchen, slidey door. I'm in the shower and I'm standing there with the shower head trying to calm the pain. And some water went just inside. And as the water came out, I'm looking down and I'm watching this green NFC chip started sliding down my thigh. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, what the fuck is that? And I caught it on my finger. I screamed out for my sister and I caught it on my finger and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, fuck. And I'm saying out loud, fuck me, that's an NFC chip. My sister came in. She said, what the fuck is that? I said, Joanna. I said, this just came out of my doodad. I said, that's an NFC chip. It slipped off my finger.
No.
Yeah.
No.
And straight down. And it was almost slow motion and it must have taken not even a second.
Yeah.
As it went to the plug hole. And my sister's going, no. And I'm going, no. And it went down the plug hole.
Mm-hmm.
If I'd had that, I could have had every one of those bastards arrested right then and there.
Yep.
We took the bath to pieces. We took the U-bend to pieces. Her U-bend, she said, you're never going to find it. And I said, no. I said, every U-bend has so much crap in it, it'll stick. And it's got claws on the side of it. It'll stick. She said, no. My landlord did the bathroom. The whole thing's been changed. It's got a new U-bend in it. It's perfectly clean. He only did it a few weeks ago. We took the whole thing to pieces. There was nothing there. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it.
Right.
Now, later on that same year, I actually had a microchip, an RFID chip, in my hand. And I had it removed. They tried to tell me it was a wood splinter.
No.
I said, that thing's been sitting in my hand for 2 years. If it was plant material, my hand would have gone septic and I would have lost my thumb. Now you're just taking the piss. I had a doctor, Freemason, a surgeon, insist that I was wrong, that he was the doctor, so he knew what he was talking about, and it was a wood splinter. And then he put the phone down. But I've asked in records on 3 separate occasions to have the pathology, the lab results. They won't give them to me. There are none. It was never tested
Yeah.
because they knew what it was.
Yeah.
I had another one in my butt cheek. These were all put in the hospital in Bodmin when I was sectioned, when they had me on the pool table. I had another one that was injected just outside the entrance to my bottom, basically, that was constantly activated every time I went to bed to try and go to sleep. And it was incredibly painful. I got so sick of it. And when they lied about this and I found it, basically what they'd done, they hadn't put it into the muscle properly and it worked its way to the top, just under the surface of the skin.
Yeah.
And I'm in the shower washing and I'm thinking, hang on a minute, that bloody thing's come to the surface. It killed me. I squeezed it so hard in between my thumb and my forefinger, I smashed it. Then I rang the doctors and said, right, there's something, I don't know what it is, but I need to come and see the nurse. Because I thought, right, if I can get them to take out the remnants, I can prove there was an RFID chip in there.
Yeah.
They made me wait 2 days to go to the doctor's surgery. We're too busy. By that time, it had gone septic. What was left in there went septic, burst, and I lost everything. So that was 2 occasions when I could have had them all arrested and proved what was done to me.
Yeah.
Gone. So that was when I thought, right, fuck this shit. And then in 2021, when they all started lying and the police lied about the rape investigation, the hospital lied about the rape investigation, and I realised I was just banging my head against a brick wall.
Yeah.
That was when I thought, right, now it's time for me to start breaking down who these men are.
Yes.
I realised they were in the warehouse at the bottom of my garden. I knew it was police officers. Then I started investigating what police officers were involved. I started investigating the police themselves. I started investigating their family members. I started investigating the businesses they're involved in, the investments they've got, any businesses that ex-police officers are involved in. I've gone down every rabbit hole. I've got so much information. I can take at least 100 people down.
Yeah.
At least 100 people. And they're just the ones right at the front. All the little peripheries, I can take them all down as well with what I've got against the big people. They're so worried about me now. When I first came to the university today, because obviously we tried this interview at my house on Monday,
Right.
and the internet connection kept being interrupted. First, we couldn't get the camera to work. Then the sound went and the connection just wouldn't connect at all.
Yeah.
And we gave up. When I came to the university today, because obviously I'm still registered as a student, so I can come here and use the university. When I first got here today, because what I said to you was, right, if I go to the university, because I'll be using their Wi-Fi connection, they're going to have to knock out the entire system if they want to interrupt the connection. So it's going to affect all the students that are using the computers. I'm actually using my laptop here, but their internet connection.
Right.
Because I found out that I couldn't use one of their computers to do it. I had to bring my own. When I first arrived, it's why I was a few minutes late. When I first arrived, the first thing I did, I went to see the guy that works in the library because I'm friendly with him. And I said, right, I said, you know all this stuff that I've been investigating? He said, yeah. I haven't told him about the targeting thing. I've just told him I've been investigating people for corruption. And I said, you know all this stuff I've been investigating? He said, yeah. I said, well, I'm almost ready to start exposing now. I said, I've got an interview booked with a lady in America who's got a podcast. I said, but when I tried to do it from my house, the connection kept being interrupted. We couldn't do it. I said, so I realized if I came to the university and used the Wi-Fi connection here, they can't disconnect the connection because it'll affect everybody and all the lectures as well. And he went, no, good thinking. I said, can you give me a room that I can use? I said, because I was going to come tomorrow. I said, but have you got anything today? And he said, right, we've got one and it's in the Exchange building. I said, okay, fine. I said, can you come up with me to help me? I said, I use Ethernet at home. I said, I've got my Ethernet cable with me. And he said, no. I said, you're not going to find any of the rooms that we can use that will let you use an Ethernet. All has to be on Wi-Fi. I said, that might pose a problem. Can you come with me to help me set it up? I said, because doubtless if I try it, I'm not going to be able to get the Wi-Fi to turn on my computer. So he came up with me. Now, I'm registered as a student here on the film and television degree course, even though I'm intermitting because I had to take time off to help my daughter with babysitting. I'm still registered as a student, so I can use all of the facilities.
Perfect.
When we came up, and he said, right, that's the room. He said, somebody's still in there. So we stood over there trying to get me connected. He said, right, turn the computer on, blah, blah, blah. And he said, right, which one do you want to connect to? And I said, well, I'll connect to the Falmouth University Wi-Fi, because there's 2 universities that work from this campus. One is Falmouth University and the other one is Exeter University. Exeter's further up in Devon. But they operate part of their degree courses from here. So I said, right, if I try and connect to the FX, Falmouth University, it wouldn't connect me. We tried 3 times and he said, that's really weird. He said, you're still registered as a student. I said, of course I'm registered as a student. He said, well, it should be connecting you. He said, right, okay, fine. He said, try it as a guest. He said, there's no way it can't connect you to that. He said, loads of people come here and they always connect as a guest if they're not a student. It wouldn't connect me as a guest. He said, I really don't understand that. He said, try connecting to the Exeter University. No. And he said, right. He said, I'm not in the IT department. He said, so, and I said, I said, the IT people are still there. I said, I'll nip down to the IT office and ask them. So I went down to the IT office, which is in the other part of the building. And I said, right, blah, 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 blah. I've got an interview with a lady in America for a podcast. I said, I need this connected. I said, it won't let me connect to anything. They tried connecting me to the Falmouth University. Blocked. It wouldn't connect. It was working and my computer was working, but it wouldn't let me connect. I had 2 of the staff come out and both of them couldn't work out why. Then they tried to connect me as a guest and I was blocked from that as well. That was more, what's going on? Then they tried to connect me to the east. Right, we'll connect you to the Exeter. That'll let you go through. No. Now they all looked. Then another one came out and he said, what's going on? Well, we've tried to connect her to this, it won't do it. We've tried to connect her as a guest, it won't do it. We've tried to connect her to Exeter, it won't let her connect. And I said, look, I'm running out of time here. I've got to get this interview going. I don't want to, I said, the lady's not going to be able to do my interview after today. He said, right, come out the way. He said, can I go on your computer? I said, yeah. He said, I'm going to log you into Exeter University with my password and my credentials. He said, so you'll be able to get online and use it, which is how I'm doing this interview with you now. As soon as that happened, as soon as I walked out of the IT office and made my way up here, all I could hear in the V2K world was, fucking bastard. How she got online? She's managed to get one of the fucking IT guys to connect her on his account. Fucking bastard. They really didn't want me connecting.
No, they don't. Because the more that we expose this program, the sooner it's going to be taken down, and it needs to be.
Yes.
It's pure evil. And those people that have realized that they've done something wrong on the other side of this should be whistleblowers in order to, save their souls from, being sold to the devil. So I had the clicking in my ear, like the popping.
Yes.
It just barely, probably about 20 minutes went away.
Now, when I spoke to Barry Trower about that, that's a particular microwave thing that's being used. The clicking is a particular thing that they do. It's very harmful.
Yeah.
And when I went to interview him, he actually said to me, I was with him for just over 2 hours. And at the time, he was doing lots of interviews with people, lots of work with international governments on 5G and all that kind of stuff. But he was also doing a fair few interviews with people from America, telephone negotiations and meetings and stuff. And he actually said to me at that time, I've got a meeting with somebody in America that he doesn't have any Wi-Fi in his house. He doesn't have computer, nothing. All he's got is a landline. He doesn't have a mobile phone, nothing. He's got none of that in his house and it's shielded.
Yeah.
All he's got is a landline. He said to me, he said, I have to take this call meeting. There's an awful lot more. He said, from what you've told me, he said, I'm so shocked at how much you know. I mean, I haven't even covered this much of all the information that I've got because there just isn't time.
Yeah.
And I want to try to give people in this interview, I want to try to give people a kind of basic outline on see, these things are planned years ahead. You can be targeted for 20 years and have no idea it's been happening until they decide to start heavy targeting you. And when they start to heavy target you, that's when they've been targeting you for such an amount of time that they think you've reached your usefulness. And then they're going to start the heavy targeting, because most people, when they do the amount of I haven't covered even a little bit of what they've put me through with myself, my dogs, my family, my friends even. But when they get to the point where they're going to start heavy targeting you like that, it's because they think they've reached a stage where they're either going to kill you or you're going to be pushed into suicide. And that's what they try to do with most people. They try to get people into a state of anguish that's so deep and desperate, you'll commit suicide to get away from it all. And with me, everything they've done to me, I'm a stubborn cow. Everything they've done to me, it's pushed me the other way.
Right.
And I can honestly say, actually, had I not, I've always grown up in the spiritual world. My mother's sister, my Auntie Winnie, she was a medium, a clairvoyant. My mother had clairvoyant abilities. And she used to take me to the spiritualist church when I was a little girl. I had spirits all around me when I was little. I ended up running up the stairs. We lived in a huge house. When my dad left the RAF and we came back from Singapore, they bought a guest house, big house, turned it into a guest house. And we and my sisters were up on the top floor, and it was 5 floors up. I used to go up those stairs 3 by 3. If I had to get up in the night to go to the toilet, I dreaded it, because whenever I came up the stairs, there were always people around me. And at that time, I didn't realize that they were spirits. I just knew there were people around me, and it frightened me. And I used to run up the stairs 3 by 3. So I've always had an understanding of the spiritual world. I've always been very oriented towards helping other people and being very close to animals and nature.
Yeah.
And even though, especially the last 10 years of my life, and in particular the last 7, have been so horrifically devastating with what they've put me through and what I've survived. At the same time, they've expanded my consciousness and awareness on a spiritual level that never would have happened without it.
Yeah.
My healing, they shut me down for nearly 10 years. From when I came back from London, I stopped meditating. I used to meditate every day. I used to do yoga every day. I used to walk for miles every day. I was always slim. I've been slim all my life and fit. They gave me symptoms of arthritis, fibromyalgia. I went up from a size 12 to 14. They blew me up to a size 28. I was fucking massive. I could barely walk. And I mean, now I'm a size 18, 20. 3 times over the last 7 years, they've made me go back down to a size 14, 16 in 6 weeks by using frequency, and I haven't dieted at all.
Yeah.
When they thought that I was going to start sleeping with the guy in Hastings to get this chip out, within 6 weeks, I went back down to a size 14. I was waking up an inch smaller every day, and I wasn't doing anything different.
Yeah.
I lost loads of weight. I didn't have any stretch marks. I lost all the weight. And then when they realized that I wasn't going to be having a sex life with the guy that helped me get the microchip out, all of a sudden, overnight, the weight started to come back on. Nothing changed. My eating didn't change. The weight went back on. Then it came off again. When I went over to Ireland, I think they thought that I was going to start dating somebody there. Again, the weight dropped off. Now, when they made me put the weight back on before, they didn't take me back up to what they took me to last time. They obviously decided they were going to do some different things with me, but I did go back up to a size 18. And it was a UK 18. I don't know what it is in America. And then in 2022, when I went over to Ireland, again, just before I left, I started to lose loads of weight. So by the time I got to Ireland and settled into my college degree, which I think took about 5 weeks, I was back down to a size 14. No dieting, nothing had changed. In fact, I was in a stressful situation because I just have to uproot, move sticks, and I lost a load of my property because the guy turned up with a van that was too small for my stuff. I lost £5,000 worth of woolen fabrics
Wow.
that I'd spent a few years buying up because I wanted to set up a little dog furniture business. I lost it all. I lost it all. It was all part of the plan,
Yeah.
but I lost it.
Yeah.
And then when was the last time they did it? Just before I came to university in 2023. When they realised I wasn't going to date anybody in Ireland, all of a sudden, the weight came back on. Now, I'd already spoken to Barry Trower. By the time when I came to university in 2023, just a few weeks before I started my course again, and it was a 6-week period, I went down 2 dress sizes. I think they thought that I was going to try and date some young chap at the university or get hit on by somebody, and I'd accept it. Basically, what they tried to do, I've realised now, and through evidence I've got through talking to other people that are involved with it and from the V2K and piecing together what I've been told by other people going back to the Navy guy that told me that me and my daughter are on their websites. And then what Mick told me in Hastings, the engineer, about the police putting me on video channels when, basically what they were doing was recording it, putting it onto videotapes and selling the tapes. Mick actually confessed to me that he was the guy that was running off a lot of the videos for them. And I remember when I was 16 going into his property to see him, and he had wall-to-wall video players that were running 24 hours a day, and he was just running off hundreds of porn videos. I didn't like him. But I was bloody glad in 2019 that I knew him.
Yeah.
Because he helped me work out a lot of what was going on.
Yeah.
And he hated somebody that was involved, so it made him help me even more because he hated one of the people that was involved. And he said, I've hated this guy for years, so I'm going to help you sort this out.
Good.
And he did. He helped an awful lot. It was actually him that directed me to start looking people up on Companies House for tax evasion, because he said, you're going to find that a lot of them are running businesses and they're not paying any tax. And police officers also have started changing their names and the spelling of their names so they can be directors on certain companies that are dormant. They have working websites. So this is another thing. They use companies that are dormant, not trading companies.
Yeah.
But those companies have trading websites that are members only. These are the sex websites. And they set them up for different targets. I've worked all of it out. I've got so much information. I can't wait for the right person to get in touch with me and say, right, we're doing an investigation. Give us what you've got, because I've got everything.
Good.
I've got everything. I've been down it's like when I came for my interview for the journalism degree in 2023, and talking to the journalism lecturer here, Steve Bow, and he said, Jesus Christ, you've been down every available rabbit hole. He said, what you're telling me, he said, we're not allowed to, he said, the media aren't allowed to cover any of this. It's all classified. He said, what you're telling me has got people killed. He said, aren't you worried for your safety? And I said, well, what can I do? I said, they've already tried to kill me. I've been shot at on a bus. I said, in 2019, January 2019, they penned me in a 3-car police maneuver and tried to run me off the road to kill me. I think that was their first attempt at trying to section me, and it went tits up. I said, in February 2022, I was shot at on a bus, and it was a .22 rifle bullet that went through the window. I said, the person came out of it. Now, I've been visiting my sister, and I went to get the bus home, and the bus stop that I normally used was on a stretch of road that was completely dark, and there was a huge hedge that you could hide behind without being seen by that bus stop. Something told me, don't go to that bus stop. Walk further down the road where it's all lit up by the petrol station and wait there at the bus stop. And I hesitated because I thought, if I walk there, there's a possibility I might miss my bus, and then I've got to wait an hour for another one. And I thought, no, I'm going to pay attention to my instincts and go down to the other bus stop, which I did. Got on the bus at the other bus stop. As we drove past the other bus stop, 2 kids, teenagers, about 12, ran out in front of the bus. The bus driver slapped the brakes on just as this hit the window. There were African nurses on the bus. obviously they knew it was a bullet, they all ran to the front of the bus. There was one nurse sitting on this side of me who stayed seated because he had headphones on with music playing. I think the bullet went through the window and straight into his bag, because I searched the bus the day afterwards. It was in the bus depot. I went down to the bus depot, put a request in for the CCTV footage.
Yeah.
I asked the engineer at the back, I said, look, I was on the bus when this happened yesterday. Do you mind if I come in and see if I can find any debris? And he said, what are you looking for? I said, it doesn't matter, but can I check the bus? I dropped something. And he said, yeah, sure. That I took photographs. I've got close-up photographs of bullet fragments in the glass of the window. The bus company took 6 weeks to reply and told me that all the cameras weren't working. Cameras inside the bus and cameras outside the bus, and they all working.
Conveniently.
Now, there were 6 people on that bus. There was a woman. They were all going up to the hospital. They're all nurses going up to the hospital for their shift. When we got off at the hospital, because I had to change buses to go out into the sticks where I was living, and I said to this nurse, she was talking to me outside. She looked at the window. She said, that's a 2-2 bullet hole. And I said, yeah, I know. I said, how do you know about that? She said she was from one of the Eastern European countries. She said that this is all over the place where I live. She said, was that bullet meant for you? She said, you were the only person besides that other nurse sitting at the back of the bus, weren't you? And I said, yeah. She said, you didn't move, did you? I said, no. She said, that bullet was meant for you, wasn't it? I said, yes. She went, you're a brave woman. What are you involved in? I said, you don't want to know. Trust me, you don't want to know. Anyway, she left. I went back a few days later on that same bus at the same time. And the male African nurse that was sitting behind me, who was the first one to run to the front of the bus, I switched my phone on to video record, and I asked him, I took photographs of him, and I videoed him, and I asked him if he would give me a statement. He was so scared. No, I can't talk to you. Leave me alone. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to, leave me alone. Then he tried to get aggressive. He said, are you photographing me? You photographed me. And he tried to get aggressive. I said, no, I'm not. Just leave me alone. All I wanted was a statement for what happened. No, don't ask me. I didn't see anything. Go and ask somebody else. There were other people on the bus. He was too frightened to talk to me. But I've got him. I've got his face so he can be identified for an investigation.
Yeah.
But it was like...
Yeah.
When the journalist said to me, you know, he said, I'm surprised you're still alive, and aren't you scared for your life? And I said, well, what can I do? I said, they've already tried to kill me a couple of times. I said, what can I do? I said, look, if they're going to kill me, they're going to kill me. There's nothing I can do to stop them. And I'm certainly not going to live my life worried and scared and fearful.
Yeah.
That's just not who I am.
I'm not afraid to die.
Is,
I'm like you. I'm not afraid to die because I actually can't die, and you can't die either, because our spirits will just propel us up to the next level of...
Well, we go back into the infinite consciousness. This is just, our bodies are just a vessel for carrying our soul. It's just an experience. It's just an experience. People have got so much to learn. I recommend, and you know, there's going to be a lot of people that will listen to me say this, and they're going to think, you know, that man's a lunatic. And yes, I have to say that when this first happened, I'm talking about David Icke. When he first came out into the public arena, and I think it was 1989 or 1990, when he did an interview with Terry Wogan, and they completely slated him and took the piss out of him. And I have to say, he had also just been and done an ayahuasca experience in Peru. So his mind was awake to lots of different things. He went straight on television and started talking about the stuff that he was bringing through, which was a mistake. I mean, it was the right thing to do because it catapulted him into, you know, people's views, but it allowed people, and it was all done on purpose to make sure, and they used him as the catalyst to make sure that if anybody ever spoke up about any of this stuff, they would be labeled as, oh God, we've got another David Icke nutter here. And anybody, if I ever spoke about anything to do with anything like that in the years before I knew what was going on with the targeting program. You were always compared, oh, we got another David Icke here. Don't listen to her. She's a nut job. She's a David Icke fan. But you see, the thing is, I was never a David Icke fan. I listened to some of the stuff right at the beginning, and then I've completely ignored him for the rest of my life. And only in the last, and I can prove it with receipts, it's only in the last 2 months that I've actually started watching documentaries, interviews, and I bought 2 of his books. I bought The Trap, which is one from, I think he wrote in 2021, possibly 2022. I tell you what, I recommend that book. The first, probably the first third of the book, you don't really think it's going anywhere because it's talking about his life from his childhood, then his early football career, his school years, his early football career, his early journalism career and working in the media. And then about halfway through the book, he then goes full on into what he knows.
Yep.
It's worth getting that book because I tell you what, it describes for people so much. And I would recommend that anybody who is either being targeted or is involved with somebody that's being targeted, I recommend you buy his books, The Trap, The Reveal, and his latest book, which is, God, and I can't remember what it's called anyway, but it's the one that's just The Roadmap. It's called The Roadmap, the latest one. I bought it, but I haven't read it yet because I'm still reading The Trap. It's, oh, giddy. Lovely. But I recommend they read it.
Okay.
I recommend they read it because he talks about all the stuff that we post about, you know, with the government involvement and the fact that the COVID was a con, the fact that all these wars are a con.
Yeah.
He discusses all of this, and he's been talking about this stuff for 30 years, which is why they labeled him as a kook.
Exactly. But we know that that's only for truth tellers. So I've listened to David Icke for a while now, like 3 or 4 years.
I'm glad that I didn't before because I've come up with the same stuff that he's talking about independently. Which I think is an important thing to do because it verifies for other people that, well, if there are other people that are researching, investigating and experiencing things and they've got documented evidence to prove what they found that matches what this guy's been telling everybody for 30 years, there's definitely, and then other people that are coming up with their own research, investigations, experience and documented evidence. These people can't all be wrong. And sooner or later, and especially, I'm so grateful for the Epstein files release because he's documented not only the paedophile rings, which is linked to Freemasonry, but he's also documented the fact that they are all involved in the targeting programs and it was run as an entertainment business. This is another aspect. There is also the aspect, it's not only targeting people, destroying their lives and people making money off it because they get paid to do it to you. There's also the sex website aspect of things where people are spied on in their houses, not only with cameras, there's millimeter wave technology that the military have had for years. It sees into your home through walls, through everything. The only thing this stuff can't penetrate is lead. And unfortunately, lead is so expensive, people can't afford to have their houses lined with it unless they're millionaires. And it's what I'm going to be doing when I get paid off.
Yep.
As I get this exposed and I'm paid through the courts, I'm having my house built in Sicily and lead lined.
Yes. With copper pipes.
Yes. Yes, definitely. And people don't realize that it's not only the sex websites and the targeting things, they've also, we're all being used as virtual reality video play. People with money, and the engineer that was helping me in 2019 and 20, he said on the dark web, he said there's a menu on the dark web. These people are all running their targeting businesses and it's all advertised on the dark web. You can have somebody targeted for the right amount of money. There are coppers, police officers and military men in Cornwall and businessmen that are Freemasons that are attached with their little groups, like the Cornish Mafia. If they split up with their wife or their girlfriend and they don't want to lose property or kids or whatever, they will have the woman targeted. They'll have her targeted so that she'll start displaying symptoms of paranoia. Then they'll accuse her of being mentally ill. And then they'll accuse her of being mentally ill so that when the divorce comes through court, the women lose the house, any money, and the children. But as soon as it's all over, all the symptoms disappear, that they've had their lives destroyed. Now, I think it was round about 2011, and there was a lady in Helston who was getting divorced from a Freemason, and he was an architect. Nasty little man. Didn't like him. I caught the tail end of a conversation she was having with a friend. I was waiting to see a chiropractor, and she was in the waiting room. She was talking to this woman, and she was talking about being targeted and the fact that she was worried that he was going to take the children off her and she said, I'm being targeted and they're trying to tell everybody I'm mentally ill and they're doing something and it's got to do with the Navy base. I only caught bits of the conversation, but she was saying that she was being targeted. It was being done from the Navy base and that they were trying to have her certified as mentally ill so she'd lose the children in the house.
Yeah.
And then it turned out she lost everything. And it wasn't until, obviously, my targeting started. And then in 2019, when they had me hospitalized and raped, and I was then introduced to you're targeted. And I realized the conversation that I've been listening to with that woman. And I thought, shit, this is what they do. And there's other people that I've spoken to. And then eventually, just before I moved down to Sussex, after they had me in the hospital, I went to see the wife of the Navy guy, the wife that I was friends with. I went to see her to talk to her. And she actually told me that he was involved in the targeting program. She also told me that she used to work at a bank. And she told me that years beforehand, they got divorced, I think, in 2016. And in 2015-16, she was explaining a lot about him to me that I obviously at that time, I didn't know I was targeted, but she was giving me a lot of information about him that then later I pieced together in 2019. And I went to see her again in 2019. And she said to me, she said, you know, I told you that when he was buying all those rental properties and I was working at the bank, he was getting her to sort mortgages out for him for the rental properties at the bank where she worked. She made him tell her what he was involved in because he was putting huge deposits down on the properties and his wages at the Navy weren't equating to the money that he was bringing home. He was putting huge amounts of money down as deposits on these properties, like half of the money for the value of the property. Where does a man that doesn't earn 50 grand a year get 50 grand cash to put down for a deposit on it? And he owns about 7 properties. We did at that time. He owns more now. She said, I made him tell me where he was getting his money from. She said, that's when we started sleeping in separate bedrooms. Pedophile rings, porn rings, voyeur rings, all of it. She told me everything. She said he's got a fucking yacht. It's worth over £1 million moored in the harbour. I said, where does he get the money for that? And she looked out the window. She said, I have no idea. And they paid her £15,000 in 2019 to try to persuade her to help do me over. She only went halfway. She tried to create a situation where I was made to feel paranoid, only it backfired because they left the window open and I heard the conversation and I left. I realised what was going on. I think she might have left the window open on purpose so I could hear what was going on, but it was him that came to see her and he was trying to set me up for something and she said, no, I won't do it. I won't let you do it because she's my friend. So she backed out. And then I realised what was going on because the window was open. She locked me in the house. I went out to talk to him. It's really weird. And I thought, okay, fine, you can't be trusted. Yeah. So I actually saw her. I bumped into her a few months back in Helston and I went, oh, hello. How are you? She went, oh, I'm all right. I said, listen, I want to come and see you and talk to you. I'm going to give her some information about her ex-husband. And I'm going to say, right, you're either going to help me with this you're going to go to prison and lose everything. All those properties that he gave you in the divorce to buy your silence, you're going to use, because everything he owned was bought with the proceeds of crime. And you are going to go to prison as a conspirator. And conspiracy carries a minimum 4-year sentence in this country.
Yeah.
And I know she's not going to want to go to prison. She's very upstanding.
Yeah.
But again, the situation with them, I mean, I can't go into details here because we're on film, but there's a situation with him and his wife. And I think he's involved in a lot more dark stuff that involves children.
Yep.
She doesn't know about it.
Yeah.
But she doesn't know about it.
There's about 800,000 children that go missing just from the U.S. alone. And that number needs to stop and should be 0. But, if we're dealing with satanic, Freemasons here. But it's not a religion. It's a cult.
Have you noticed how all this information, I mean, it's like before maybe the last 6 months, I've been very vociferous in all of my posts about Freemasons being involved. And I've been attacked several times by people, obviously, because they're involved with this stuff and they're trying to make me take stuff down. But there weren't many people talking about Freemasonry, and definitely not at government level. Not, you wouldn't find professionals poo-pooing Freemasonry or anything, and connecting them to paedophile rings and everything else, and police officers. Whereas now, all of a sudden, it's bursting out of every scene. People are talking about the fact that, this all seems to be connected to Freemasonry, and it's satanic, and there's child abuse involved, and ritual abuse, and paedophilia, and there's paedophile websites, and all these people, and all these government ministers, and all these TV, and oh my God. I watched a video a few days ago, and it's I can't remember what his name is now, but he was on X Factor. I think he's Australian. It goes on for about 5 hours, but he shows in this video, there are thousands of them. I did not realize just how many. Basically, anybody that's successful in music, TV, or film, they're all involved. They don't get to be successful with their careers unless they join this Freemasonry cult. It's why P. Diddy was running that sex thing. Everybody was filmed. Everybody used drugs. There was rape, pedophilia, gay sex, the whole thing. And it's done so they can blackmail everybody. And I hear this lot talking about blackmail all the time. It was almost like they were worried I was going to start uncovering the fact that they're involved in the blackmail side of things. I already knew it. I already knew that about 4 years ago. I really worked all that out. Because there's no way that they can get certain people involved with that. But it's like the GP that they got to lie for them. After my other GP left, the other one stepped in, and all of a sudden my records changed completely. The stuff written in the stuff that the police have used, and they've quoted my doctor, and yet there's no backup for what they've said in my medical files. And eventually, in November 2022, I sent a letter to the doctor's surgery, and I said, right, this is the last time I'm going to try and write to you because I'm sick of being lied to. Now I'm going to prosecute. I want you to give me the document that proves this happened. I want you to give me the document that proves this happened, because certain things the police have said happened that my doctor was involved in, allegedly. It can't have happened without there being documents in my medical files. I've had 6 copies of my GP files, and nowhere are any of these documents or any reference to anything that people said has happened. So I said to him definitively, I want you to give me copies of these documents. They're either being withheld from my records, which is illegal, or they don't exist. And I cornered him on about 6 things that would have meant he was going to prison. Not only did he resign straight away, but the manager of the practice, the senior doctor, she also resigned. The practice almost closed down. 4 months resignation they gave, and it almost closed the practice. My daughter said to me, oh my God, Mum, the doctor's practice is looking like it's going to close down. She said, Dr. Vivian's leaving and Dr. Jordan. I said, yes, I know. She said, how do you know? You're not with the surgery anymore. I said, because it was my letter that caused it. She didn't want to talk to me about it. If I try to talk to my daughter about anything, they've got her program to shut down. She just shuts down. Her eyes go almost blank, like something's closing her mind down. Really weird to watch.
Yeah. I've seen that. I've witnessed that before.
It's so weird. It's I call it the COVID look.
The blank stare. Yeah.
Yeah. It is literally just like somebody flicks a switch. Say like I'm having this conversation and then I'm not having that conversation because that switch has been flicked and everything's been turned. And that's how it is. You can be talking to somebody and then all of a sudden that switch will go and their eyes go. It's like somebody turned a button off and you know those dolls that you get and you flick a switch on the back of the head and it stops talking. It's like that.
Yes.
I went to interview a lady called Frances Leader. She was very high on the protest scale in England. She was at a lot of anti-fracking protests. She was involved with Greenpeace and the Greenham Common, you know, the nuclear things back in the 80s.
Yeah.
She's very famous. I went to meet her up in her home in Bournemouth. At the beginning of 24, I went up twice and stayed for the weekend twice. Really nice woman. And she lives with her son, really nice guy. Anyway, we were discussing lots of different things. And she actually hadn't left her house since COVID. She stayed in. She's quite old now, but she stayed in her house. She hadn't left the house. And I said, look, we need to get you out of the house. I said, just have a shower, get changed. I said, come out in the car with me. I said, you don't have to get out of the car. She's got trouble walking and stuff. So you don't have to get out of the car. You can sit in the car. She said, I just want to get you out of the house. She had a scooter that stopped working and then COVID, she stopped going up. I said, right, come on, let's get you out of the house. Come in the car. I'll go shopping. I'll make dinner. I said, I'll do us a nice Chinese stir fry or something. And I said, just come out, we'll get you in the car. Anyway, we drove to Sainsbury's. And I left her in the car. I said, right, I won't be long. So I'll go in and get the bits. I came back to car. I was probably in there for about 20 minutes. It was quite busy. When I got back to the car, she looked visibly shaken. And I said, what's wrong? Sorry, I need to put some lips on. My lips are really dry. Remind me to talk about dehydration. It's very important for targets. Anyway, I said to her, what's wrong? And she said, you're right. She said, I can't believe what I'm seeing. And I said, what? She said, people are walking around like zombies. She said, I haven't left the house since COVID hit. So I didn't know any of this. She said, what you've been telling me about what's going on with people, she said, I'm seeing it now with my own eyes. She said, people are walking around like they're all looking at the floor. She said that everybody's got a blank expression. She said, there's no life in anybody. They're not walking along the road and talking to each other. She said they're either buried in their phones or they've just got blank expressions on their faces. She said, this is really scary. She was visibly shaken. And I said, this is what we're all living with on the outside world. I said, this is life now. I said, these injections have got biotech in them that are connecting everybody electrically to the frequency grid. Basically what these injections do, a lot of them have got so many aluminium particles. They're tiny little silver triangles. I've got a blood sample from when I was in Bodmin. Mick, the engineer, his cat's diabetic, and he's got those little syringes to do the cat's injections. He drew some blood on my arm. He said, I've got his grandfather, I think it was his grandfather, invented the forensic microscope that the police use in this country. It was invented by his grandfather. And they use it for their forensic blood examinations and fluids and all that kind of shit. He's got his father's microscope. He said, I want to look at your blood under the, he said, you said they injected you in between your toes. Do you know what it was? I said, no. I said, but it's made my toes go numb where they injected it. He drew my blood and he stuck it on a slide. We put it under the microscope. My red blood cells were misshapen and mostly all clumped together. And there were millions of these tiny, tiny little silver triangles that were about 1/10 of the size of my blood cells. And he said, there's more of those in there than red blood cells. He said, I haven't got a clue what they are. And he said, and there's no way you can take it because everybody's going to lie. I have tried. When people in 2023 and 2024, when there were all these people on Substack that were doing the microscopy for the COVID and they were looking at all the nanotech and everything else, I tried contacting everybody saying, I've got a blood sample from 2019 that I need to have somebody look at under a microscope to tell me what it is I'm looking at. I've still got the blood sample. It's dried, but it's still viable. All you need to do is put it on a slide, wet it, and you can see everything that's in there. I can't find anybody that will even answer me. I've had one person that said, I'm not, and I had one person that said, I'm sorry, I'm in Australia. And obviously, if I send it, it's never going to get there. But I haven't got anybody else to reply to me. They won't answer me. So I'm still stuck. So it's going to have to wait for the investigation. But I think I heard something a couple of days ago. Somebody was talking about aluminium being tiny little triangles. I think they overloaded my system with aluminium because it connects your body to the electrical frequency grid that they're using via the towers. And Musk, his Starlink satellite system, is part of the targeting program.
Yes, I know.
It's not there for our communication system. It's there for this mass surveillance thing that's the digital ID grid, and it's also there for targeting. It's double. What they're going to do with this digital ID is they're going to bring it in. It will then work alongside the surveillance system, because basically this surveillance system has been learning our habits as well as the AI systems. And those AI systems, they didn't start looking into that when they told us. They'd already been looking into it for 20 years.
Yes.
This has all been going on in the background. They plan things years ahead.
Yes.
And when it's released, when you see the patent coming out, they've already been playing around with it for 5 to 10 years before the patent's released.
Yes.
You've got Musk coming out with brain chips. You can guarantee that at least 15 years before he was talking about it, the military were already playing with them and implanting them. Now, in the UK, in the 90s and the 80s and 90s, the British Prison Service were offering certain prisoners early release if they agreed to be microchipped for experiments. I interviewed in Northern Ireland a guy called Stephen Kelly. He's dead now. They murdered him last year. And he used to live in a town called Coventry, and he used to be a drug dealer in the 80s and 90s, rather a large one. He used to provide drugs to prostitutes as well. And one prostitute in particular used to go to the swinging parties run by the police officers, the aristocracy, government ministers. And certain of the prostitutes were paid £10,000 extra if they would take their children along with them to be used at the parties.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, this one prostitute, these parties were held monthly, sometimes bi-monthly, but usually monthly, usually in country houses owned by the aristocracy. Prince Philip used to go to them as well. The now dead Prince Philip. All the way up to the top. Now, this particular prostitute, he said when she used to come and see him to get drugs, and he said he used to sell hash. He said, but for her, I used to get other stuff as well to kill pain. I said, what were you killing pain for? Apparently, she used to come and see him, and she used to have both sides of her mouth ripped, where they were brutalizing her with oral sex, performing sex on them, and then they just brutalize her. And they'd be 2 of them at a time, and it would rip her mouth, and just, they are sick.
They are sick.
And he said, she'd have 1 behind her and 2 at the front. And he said she did this every month. And I said, well, why did she? He said, well, that's what I asked her, why she was doing it. He said, but she was paid so much money, she didn't have to do anything else for the entire month. And I said, well, it would have taken her the entire month to recover from that.
Kidding.
He said, it did.
Kidding.
Help. He said, money, they paid these women so much money because it means nothing to them. And they paid £10,000 a pop for them to take their children. This was back in the 80s and 90s. You can imagine what money they're paying now. Well, now they breed them and disappear them from children's homes.
Exactly.
Or off the streets. I'm terrified for my grandchildren.
Yeah, I would be. Yeah.
I'm terrified for my grandchildren. You know, it's people, you know, it's not just the targeting program. You know, it's not just people saying, I'm hearing voices in my head and my neighbors are doing this to me and my car keeps being damaged and I'm having this and I've got pain and my hair's dropping out and I'm getting fat and then I'm getting thin. And it's not just that. It's a much bigger, it's all involved. It's involved with the Epstein thing. It's involved with the P. Diddy thing. Yep. It's involved with child trafficking. It's involved with the rape gangs. Yep. It's involved with social services, local councils, local MPs, government ministers, insurance companies, the people at the housing. Now, don't get me started on the housing association. Housing associations in this country, if they say that they're helping homeless people, they can register themselves as a charity and therefore never pay tax again. These are multi-million-pound companies. Yeah. And it's all a con because the people that are going through the homeless centres, those homeless centres are basically targeting centres. They've got CCTV cameras inside them that not only record everything that you're doing visually, they're also recording you audio.
Yeah.
Now, there's a homeless centre here, which I had to live in for 6 months. It was dreadful. When I came back from Northern Ireland, they wouldn't give me anywhere to live and I had to go in the homeless centre with all the junkies and alcoholics. It was dreadful. Although I did spend my time, I did a reflexology course and a load of other little courses on the side for health and safety, GDPR regulations, all this kind of. I just busied myself and did loads of courses. Yeah. But I realised that in this particular centre, they have what they call pods. And everybody that comes through the centre, they encourage them, come and sit in the pod and have a chat with one of the staff. And basically what they try to do, they try to get people to go and sit in these pods with them and basically bare their souls, you know, and act as a therapy session, you know, describe to us where all your problems started, why you started drinking, why you got into the drugs, and invariably it will lead back to childhood issues and sexual trauma and blah, blah, blah. And they're describing everything throughout their lives that's led them to the point of being homeless, addicted to drugs, addicted to alcohol or whatever. And all the time, those cameras are not only recording visually, they're recording the audio. And these people are using the information that's being given across to target people better. Yep. And those people, some of them are paid to harass other people, and some of them are just basically being targeted.
Yes.
And I saw it firsthand, and I was an observer. And I think they realised very soon after they moved me in there that they made a huge mistake, because I made friends with all the staff. Everybody loved me. And everybody that was coming into the centre, they all loved me. They ended up calling me Mother, my nickname, Mother. I ended up running cookery classes for everybody. Just took it over.
It's a way to turn it around, though. And they're like, well, we better get her out of here and get her into some different housing.
Oh, they did. They shoved me in a nasty little bedsit that was filled with black mold with a bath shower cubicle. I mean, it was basically black mold from ceiling to floor in the shower. The shower cubicle was so small. I mean, I'm a size 18, 20. And you had to be a size 12 to get into that shower cubicle. Even the lady that was supporting me from the homeless centre, she couldn't fit in the shower either. And she was a size 14, 16. And she said, you're registered disabled, aren't you? I said, yeah, because of my arthritis. She said, have you got a blue badge? I said, yes. I said, so I can prove. And she said, is it on your documentation with the homeless centre? I said, yes. She said, they never should have moved you in it. I had 4 different, I recorded them all. Every single one of them said, you should never have been moved in here, and this place wasn't cleaned. It should have. When they took me to it, not only was I horrified at the black mold in the bathroom, but the windows in the room itself. I had 3 dogs, don't forget, at that time. I had my huge dog, and he's like this long and that high. and my 2 chihuahuas, they moved me into one tiny little room. There was no table and chair for me to sit and eat at. I had to stand, and they refused to give me a table and chair. The mattress was covered in dried human excrement.
Ooh, no. Gross.
I recorded the manager. It was a manager that came with me. I recorded the whole thing, and I said, that mattress has got human excrement on it. No, it hasn't. It's just dirt. I said, flick it off with your finger. She wouldn't touch it.
Exactly.
I said, it's there. It's there. I said, it's all over the mattress. I said, there's no way I'm sleeping on that. I said, you can't force me to take this property. I said, it says in your legislation for this centre, because it's part of Coastline Housing Authority, it says I should have 3 choices on properties that are offered to me. She said, this is the only one you're going to be offered. I said, but that's breaking your own regulations. She said, it's not my decision. I'm just doing my job, and you have to sign this contract. I said, I don't have to sign the contract. She said, look, if you don't sign this contract, you're sleeping in your car because you're out of that room today. We need it for somebody else. I said, so you're going to make me homeless if I don't take this room? She said, yes. I said, I won't get my stuff in this room. She said, that's not my problem. You need to sign this. I've got another job to do. I said, you can't expect me to sleep on that mattress. It's covered in human excrement. I said, these people are junkies and alcoholics. I said, I don't use drugs and I don't drink. I said, there could be anything in that. I said, half of these people are running around with hepatitis.
Yeah.
I said, you can't. She said, I'll help you turn it over. You can sleep on it then. I
No.
said, no, it's not
No.
Anyway, she made me sign the contract and she left. And I left it half an hour. And I drove round to the homeless centre, which was literally just 5 minutes down the road. Now, take into account, I'd made friends with all the staff. I walked in, I was tearful. And I said to the people on the desk, they said, what's wrong? And I said, look, I said, this, I showed them photographs. I said, this is what they're expecting me to sleep on. I said, the bed is covered in human excrement. I said, the place is full of black mould. I said, I can't. Everybody was up in arms. No. Phone, you can't make her, you can't do this, it's wrong, blah, 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 blah. One of the staff came in and she said, right, we've had a new mattress delivered for one of the rooms. It's still in the storeroom and it's still wrapped in plastic. I'm going to ring through. We're not having this. This can't happen. She said, we're going to get somebody to come and deliver that mattress this evening. Now, one of the staff members that I was really friendly with, she was a lovely lady. She actually took my chihuahuas for a walk with me one afternoon while I was still in the homeless centre. They targeted her legs while she was walking with me. She's the ex-wife of a senior police officer, and he hates her. And because she was friendly with me, they targeted her. Now, they targeted the muscles on the back of her thighs, so it cramped up. She was crying. She said to me, oh my God, you have to help me. You have to help me. I was on my knees at the back of her trying to massage the cramp. I've never seen anything like it in my life. Her muscle was literally, they turned it up so high, it was literally knotting. Now, she's not microchipped. So this is being done remotely. And probably being done with some kind of beam. But whatever they did, it cramped her muscle up. And I could see her muscle twanging in her leg. She was crying. She was in so much pain. And I'm desperately trying to massage it out to stretch the muscle back down to stop it cramping. It went on for 10 minutes. She had to go home. She ended up leaving her job. They targeted her so heavily she had to give up her job. But they came. She turned up that night with the mattress with another worker, and I recorded the entire thing with everybody saying, and it was a maintenance man that turned up with the mattress. He said, you're registered disabled. He said, we never should have been put in here. He said, this is way unsuitable. He said, this is not suitable for a disabled person. Yeah. And I said, look, that shower, I said, not only is it filled with black mold, I said, I can't fit in it to wash. And he said, no, you won't. He said, this is not meant for a disabled person. He said, I'm going to put in a complaint in. He said, this place wasn't even cleaned before you moved in.
Gross.
He said, this is completely unacceptable. They buried his complaint.
Oh, wow.
Thankfully, I recorded everything. I even got a manager who allegedly came to inspect it a few weeks later, who then lied and said that I tried to attack him and was aggressive when he came to see me. They put it in records, trying to have me locked up. I went to the office and I recorded him and I said, you've accused me of attacking you and being aggressive when you came to view my flat. I said, you didn't even look at the bathroom. I said, you sat in my chair next to my dog, a Ridgeback. I said, and you're accusing me of attacking you and being aggressive. I said, listen, I said, if I'd done anything and raised a hand or raised my voice in your vicinity, I said, my dog would have had your face off. I said, you were less than 3 feet away from my dog. I said, so physically it can't have happened. I said, and you know as well as I do, it never happened. This meeting is over. And I said, no, it's not. You let me finish. I got my phone out of my bag and I turned it on to record. I said, now, I'm recording you. I said, I want you to repeat for my video what you just said about me trying to attack you and being aggressive when you came to my flat. Because I was recording him, he couldn't. And he said, you pointed at me. So I turned the phone round to my face and I pointed at him. I turned it back. I said, in actual fact, I didn't point at you. I said, what I did, and I put my finger past my phone. I said, what I did, I pointed to my bathroom when you said you were leaving and asked you if you weren't going to check it, seeing as that's what you came to look at. Because I was complaining about the mold and the fact that I couldn't fit in it to wash as a disabled person. He said, we didn't know you were disabled. I said, yes, you did, because I put it in the forms when I filled in to get the homeless centre room. Everybody knew.
It's all connected.
You need to leave now. Yeah, I'm going to post that video on Substack at some stage.
Yes, do that. All right.
We're
coming around hour 5. So
cool. What time is it?
Yes.
My God. It's 9:05.
Yeah, so I don't want you.
We've been here over 3 hours. Gosh.
I appreciate you and all of the information. I'm going to probably break it up in a couple of videos for this one.
Yes.
And, but it's so nice to meet you, Christina.
I'm sorry, I spoke far too much.
No, you didn't. It was great. And it's a lot of information and it's a global, targeting program.
Just before we finish, 30 seconds, okay. I need to say about the dehydration. Every person that is targeted, and in actual fact, this goes for everybody, there are blanket frequencies, and I checked this with Barry Trower and he confirmed it. There are blanket frequencies that are being sent out from satellite and the cell towers that dehydrate the entire body. And they dehydrate it from the myofascial system, which feeds all the cells and the brain. It oxygenates everything and sends all the nutrients through. The myofascial system is attached to the muscular system underneath that covers our entire body, our ligaments, tendons, sinews, the cells, the bones, everything. It connects to everything. It carries everything everywhere. There are blanket frequencies that are used that dehydrate us. And what it does is the less liquid you've got in your body, the deeper the frequencies go into your body, down to bone level. This is why when you go into a swimming pool, if you're being targeted, when you go into a swimming pool, if you swim on your back, because it's covering the spine and the spinal cord and your brain, all the physical targeting symptoms stop dead. The only thing it doesn't kill is the V2K. And I think that's something to do with Navy sonar because it works underwater. Their V2K doesn't cut off when you go underwater either. It still works. And I think it's linked to the sonar for the Navy. This is, I think, why so many dolphins and whales were turning up dead on beaches because they were tested underwater for the submarines and it was killing all the marine life. And they just made up reasons for it. But that's what I think it's linked to. I think it's linked to sonar. But the amount of water we have in our bodies, it attenuates the frequency signals when you're fully dehydrated. I started to realize I haven't actually felt thirsty for about 20 years. I can go for days on end, not drinking any water at all, and I never feel thirsty. I was getting about 3 times a year when I would be so thirsty, I just couldn't stop drinking water. And nothing would satiate that thirst because I was so dehydrated. Because now I've tested my theory by not drinking a lot, and then I've spent maybe 2 or 3 weeks drinking 2 litres of water a day. When I drink 2 litres of water a day, the physical targeting goes down because my body is rehydrating and it's filling my cells and all the tissues with the right amount of water again. And also when we have that water in our body, it's being properly energized, vitalized water. It's like fruits and vegetables. When they're water, it's vitalized. it energizes itself within those systems. And our body, when we have the right amount of water, it energizes the water and it deflects what's going on with the frequencies. This is why people very rarely feel thirsty now. This is why you'll find coppers, military, anybody involved with the targeting program, they all run, because there's two things it affects. It affects the dehydration, and they also target the lymphatic system. One, the dehydration helps the frequencies go in deeper, and the lymphatics clean out all the toxins from everything that we're breathing in and ingesting. If they shut down the lymphatic system to not working properly, those toxins build up in our bodies and it connects us better to their grid.
Yeah.
So you need to exercise. A lot of people can't jog. Get yourself an exercise bike. You need to do something that's getting your lymphatics moving. A good way to do it is get yourself a mini trampoline. 3 minutes, 3 times a day. You'll notice after a week, your body starts to feel different because it starts getting your lymphatics moving. But sedentary lifestyles is what we're all being trained to do. And the frequencies are being used on purpose to dehydrate and shut down the lymphatics. It's 2 very important things that will help everybody that's being targeted. Make sure you drink at least 2 liters of clean water a day. Most bottled water is contaminated. Filter it yourself. Even if you buy bottled water and boil it. I mean, even tap water, boiling tap water, but it's better if you distill it. Or me, I've got myself a gravity water filter, and I use that every day.
I think it's best to filter
and cut down on meat, because all meat is highly contaminated, because they're injecting them with, and now they're injecting them with mRNA vaccines, and they're injected regularly. They're not only injected with that for antibiotics, they're injected with growth hormones for milk production and beef production. They're also being given the antibiotics and vaccinations for everything else, and it's also being added to feed. Bill Gates came out with this Bovet feed additive. Stop gas farting. I mean,
it was killing. It was killing cows. Yeah.
I mean, do you imagine what it's doing to us and our children, for Christ's sake?
Yeah. So I agree. Water and food.
I noticed. I went vegetarian last year in June, and within a month, my body started reacting completely differently to everything. And I also put my dog on a mostly vegetarian diet. He's on organic biscuits that are vegan biscuits. I give him 4th grade meat. Try and, if you've got to give your dogs that, try and get the best grade food that you can. And try to go for organic if possible. If not with the meat side of things, because it is very expensive, try to buy organic biscuits. They work out roughly the same price. The cheaper the food that you're buying, the more contaminated it is, and the sicker your dog's going to get. And stop vaccinating your pets, please. You're poisoning them. All you're doing is making big pharma money and giving your pet an early death. You're connecting them to the energy grid system and this targeting program. Oh, that thing I was talking about with the dogs and them targeting the dogs to make them attack. From 2016, the Chinese have used frequency modulation to control, command, and train their police and military dogs across the board. So they were playing with it 5 to 10 years beforehand. I wrote to the British military and the British Police Association last year and asked them whether or not they're using frequency modulation to train or command police and military dogs. The military refused to answer me point blank. They won't reply. And the police denied any knowledge of it. So it's obviously bullshit, because there's no way the Chinese could have been using it from 2016 and 10 years later our police force doesn't know anything about it. So they are using it, and I'm right. All the dog attacks that have been happening, it's frequency targeting. And they've been doing it because they've picked on all the breeds of dogs that people would use for home protection. They know, even though the dogs are pets, they know that if the Gestapo turns up at your front door with this digital ID system that's about to be launched on everybody, if you misbehave and they turn up at your door to arrest you, the last thing they want to be doing is facing a dog that's going to, protect everybody to the death. And that's when they've picked on particular breeds and banned them so that people can't have them as pets, because they know they're going to protect them if they turn up at the door. And that's what it's all about. It's all about control.
Yes.
So be careful, people.
Yes.
Wake up. Listen to us, because we're not lunatics. We know what's going on.
We do. Christina, it was wonderful.
We've done it.
Yeah. Stay strong. We've got this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you for listening to the Unveiling Shadows podcast. I hope today's episode has shed light on the experiences that too often remain hidden. If you or someone you know has a story to share, please reach out to me. Remember, you're not alone and your voice matters. Follow me on social media and subscribe to the podcast for more inspiring stories. Until next time, stay strong and keep unveiling the shadows.